Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting for the Planning Advisory Committee for October 8th, 2024. My name is Matthew Deleuze, and I am the Vice Chair of the PAC. I'll start the meeting by giving a brief overview of what the Planning Advisory Committee's mandate is, as well as a breakdown of how the meeting will progress. The Planning Advisory Committee consists of 9 citizens of St. John who have been appointed by the city's nominating committee. Our role is to provide advice to Common Council on applications to amend the municipal development plan, the zoning bylaw or Section 59 conditions, subdivision proposals, public rights-of-way, easements or dedications for land for public purposes, and to make decisions with respect to proposals for conditional uses, significant variances, establishment of similar, compatible, and temporary uses. Our views and opinions are independent. Tonight's meeting will progress as follows. Shortly, the committee will vote to adopt the agenda for this evening's meeting. Following the adoption of the agenda, we will do a roll call for the members of the committee. We will then approve the minutes for any previous PAC meetings, then declare any conflicts of interest for this evening's items. We will then go through this evening's applications and follow the agenda until it is complete. For each item, city staff will provide an overview presentation. Following this, the applicant will be asked to address the committee. Once the applicant has finished their presentation, the committee may ask follow-up questions. We will then open the public hearing where any members of the public are welcome to address the committee. Each speaker has 10 minutes. We ask that you please avoid repetition of concerns or viewpoints. And if you have a large group, we encourage the delegation of a single representative speaker. Once it's your turn to speak, you will be called up to the pedestal. The committee may have questions for you following your address. Please note the committee has read all the letters and comments submitted for this meeting. The committee may ask the applicant to return to respond to any comments that arise during the public hearing. After this, the public hearing section is closed. No further comments may be made by the public or the applicant. At this point, there may only be questions of clarification to city staff by the committee. Please remember that this is a safe space and that we ask for everyone to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Should anyone interrupt the proceedings, they will receive one warning to refrain from disrupting the meeting. Should disruptions continue, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Members of the public, you are welcome to remain in the chambers to listen to the debate and decisions of the committee. However, when your item is concluded, you may leave. Should you have any follow-up questions, please contact city staff. Now, in addition to my regular opening remarks, since we do have many people in attendance tonight and a significant application on the agenda, I wanted to lay out in advance. We will be taking a break at 7:30 and then a break at 9 p.m. And in order to allow for substantive and thorough discussion by PAC and to be able to provide a recommendation based on everything we hear tonight to City Council, I will be closing the public portion of the meeting at 9 p.m. So in order to make sure that every single concern is heard, I want to hear every possible angle or different issue you may have. I strongly encourage people to avoid repeating issues. We realize that the issues are going to be shared. And just because we hear only, for example, one person say, I have concerns about water quality, we will not interpret that as there only being one person with concern about water quality. And we have read the significant amount of emails and letters received on this. So we are fully aware of the depth of concern raised by citizens of Laurenville and St. John at large. That being said, now let's move to our meeting. Roll call. I will briefly introduce all members of the PAC, as well as all city staff present in tonight's meeting. My name is Matthew Deleuze. I am the vice chair. We have Ms. Ann McShane, second vice chair, Councillor Gary Sullivan, Councillor Jerry Lowe, Mr. Phil Como, Mr. Peter Pappas, Ms. Alshaima Eldamiri, and Mr. Terry Hutchinson. From the city, we have Mark Reed, Senior Planner, Tom Llewellyn, and Eva Matson. And Puckage Nalovde. Thank you. We will now vote on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any comments or changes to the agenda required? Committee members, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Seconded by Mr. Hutchinson. All those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted. We have 3 sets of minutes. Minutes from January 16th, 2024, February 21st, 2024, and September 17th, 2024. Committee, do we have any comments on those minutes as presented? None. I would need a motion to adopt the minutes in toto from Mr. Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favor? The 3 minutes mentioned, January 16th, February 21st, and September 17th, have been adopted. Do we have any conflicts of interest from the committee members on any agenda items tonight? No? Thank you very much. All right. Moving to the application section of the agenda. Item 5.1, subdivision for Fundy Key. The applicant is Fundy Key Developments. The landowner is Fundy Key Developments and the City of St. John. The location is 35 Water Street. The plan designation is primary center. Existing zoning is waterfront commercial integrated development. Application type is subdivision. Jurisdiction for the committee, the Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to advise Common Council concerning the acceptance of land for public purposes dedications. The subdivision bylaw authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to approve an access other than a public street when advisable for the development of land. Mr. Reed, please proceed with your presentation.
This application deals with the subdivision of the Fundy Key site in advance of the first phase of development. The subdivision will necessitate land transfers between the city and the developer. It does require the committee's approval of lots which do not abut a public street and lands for public purpose associated with the recent extension of Harbor Passage. There's essentially 3 parcels of land on the site, 2 of which are subject to the subdivision. This shows the proposed plan of subdivision. The remnant of lot 18-1 in the upper right, that will be transferred to the city. Lot 1 will be retained by the city, and that lot won't have access on a public street. And then the 2 parcels to the south, parcel 3 and the other lot will be transferred from the city to the developer, and the odd-shaped parcel is the outline of the current building that's under construction. There is also an area of land for public purposes around the periphery of the site, along the harbor and along the southern boundary of the site that will be vested to the city as lands for public purposes, and this LPP area covers the recently constructed Harbor Passage section. Municipal plan has the site designated as primary center. The site is zoned waterfront development, integrated development. In terms of the private access, there are certain lots and parcels that do not abut a public street. In the interim period, these benefit from access through adjacent lands to a public street for that interim period. And there are no buildings or structures currently on site. Given this, staff support the lot creation with the existing access. In terms of lands for public purposes, normally, as the committee may recall, we generally take money in lieu under the current subdivision bylaw. In this particular case, Harbor Passage was extended along the periphery of the site, and it does align with active transportation routing identified in the city's Trails and Bikeways Strategic Plan. Given this, staff are recommending that the recently constructed section of Harbor Passage be vested as lands for public purposes. In terms of engagement, letters were sent out to landowners within 100 meters of the subject site. No letters have been received to date. Staff's recommendation is that the committee approve the creation of the proposed lots and parcels that do not abut a public street, and that Common Council assent to the vesting of lands for public purposes shown on the tentative plan of subdivision. And we're also including Common Council's assent to all necessary local government services easements for underground city infrastructure to be determined during the detailed design phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Are there any questions of clarification for staff at this time? No? Thank you. I'll now call the applicant to speak if they have a presentation or if they wish to speak on this item.
I don't have a presentation, but my name's Wallace Floyd with the funding.
If you could please come up to the mic, just because it is being broadcast, so we have the audio for those online.
My name is Wallace Floyd with Fundy Key Developments. Happy to take any questions. It was a great experience thus far working with the city on this project, and we continue to move forward.
Thank you. And I assume you're in favor of staff's recommendation?
We are in favor of staff recommendation.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant at this time? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. I will now move on to the public hearing for this item. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this agenda item? All right, final call for speakers, going once, going twice. The final call for speakers is from the public is complete. Is there anyone from the committee that would like to call the applicant back just to make sure? Do we have any last minute questions? No. All right. Thank you. I will close the public hearing portion for this item. Committee members, do we have any further questions for staff? If not, I'll look to the committee for a motion. Moved by Mr. Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favor? The motion is adopted. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, item 5.2. The applicant is Building Consulting on behalf of the City of St. John and New Brunswick Regional Development Corporation. The landowner is New Brunswick Regional Development Corporation. The location is the King William Road area and associated PIDs. Existing plan designation is Park and Natural Area, Rural Resource, Heavy Industrial, and Rural Residential. Proposed plan designation is Heavy Industrial and Park and Natural Area. Existing zoning is Green Energy, Medium Industrial, and Rural. Proposed zoning will be a new Spruce Lake Industrial Zone and Environmental Protection. The application type is a municipal plan amendment and rezoning. Our jurisdiction on this matter is that the Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council concerning proposed amendments to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw. Common Council will consider the committee's recommendation at a public hearing on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. Mr. Reid, please go ahead with staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The application before you this evening is to expand the Spruce Lake Industrial Park to provide for 586 hectares of land for future industrial uses. It does involve a municipal plan amendment, which seeks to expand the primary development area and redesignate land to heavy industrial and park and natural area. It also involves a rezoning to a new zone, the Spruce Lake Industrial Zone, and a buffer area rezoned to environmental protection. The application involves 4 PIDs along either side of King William Road. Parcel 1 shown in the attached plan is portions of a large parcel that's currently owned by RDC with the province. And of that piece, there's just over 400 hectares that's subject to the plan amendment. There's another piece, parcel 3 in the map on the opposite side of King William Road. That's a 73 hectare parcel. 17.7 hectares of that is subject to the plan amendment. And then there are 2 smaller city-owned parcels shown on the above map as parcels 2 and 4. Portions of those are involved in the plan amendment, and all of these parcels are subject to the rezoning. This shows an air photo of the site here and the area that's subject to the application. It's currently largely undeveloped. There are some portions that have been cleared. This is a view of the site here. There's a cleared portion that was used by the city for many years for a fill site, and then a site that was sold and purchased back from the private landowner recently. This is another view looking in the opposite direction along King William Road. In terms of the existing municipal plan, the lands along either side of King William Road are currently designated heavy industrial, with the back areas designated a mix of rural resource and park and natural area. The proposal would have the lands designated as heavy industrial, and there are lands in there along watercourses that are, although they are designated or proposed to be designated heavy industrial, they would still be subject to environmental regulations under the Clean Water Act, which require 30-meter watercourse setbacks. We are also proposing along the boundary of the site adjacent to the dwellings on Laurenville Road, we are also proposing that a 150-meter wide buffer strip be established as park and natural area in the municipal plan, and that would provide for a buffer between the proposed industrial park and the existing dwellings along Laurenville Road. The municipal plan speaks to the need for additional lands. Currently, there are 125 hectares of land available within the city for industrial parks. However, only 34 of those hectares are controlled by the city. And the challenge is that, as we, expand our industrial parks group and look towards, future industrial development in the city, these lands are not of a size or configuration that provide for a large-scale industrial subdivision like you would see in the Caledonia Industrial Park or some of the newer sections of the Moncton Industrial Park, for example. And that presents a barrier to future industrial development and economic growth in the city. As a result, industrial park growth has been identified as a catalytic project by City Council. So staff are of the opinion that policy LU4 of the municipal plan is satisfied, given that a need has been identified for additional industrial lands. The municipal plan also speaks to environmental considerations, and currently Dylan is preparing an environmental impact assessment, which has been registered with the province of New Brunswick for a 107 hectare portion of the site, which is the portion along the eastern side of King William Road, in the northernmost portion of the large parcel. Some of the key issues that were identified through the EIA process were emissions and sound from construction equipment during the clearing and site excavation phases. That can be managed through appropriate maintenance of the equipment. There were wetland impacts identified. Mitigation measures for that would be requiring, there would still be provincial wetland and watercourse alteration permits required for that work, as well as buffer zones and retention of natural drainage patterns in those areas. In terms of vegetation, The site is forested. However, the EIA found that the forested areas have low ecologic value, and we're also proposing to retain that 150-meter buffer along the eastern portion of the site adjacent to the lands along Lorneville Road. In terms of wildlife and fish habitat, the work would be subject to provincial permitting, and the work would be conducted outside of the bird breeding season. And again, the retention of the 150-meter buffer along the eastern portion of the site does provide an area for a wildlife corridor. Also, in terms of the EIA considerations, the completion of the EIA aligns with policy LU 110 of the municipal plan, which identifies environmentally significant features and proposes a means to mitigate impacts. We also note that specific industrial uses on the site could trigger an EIA under provincial legislation. With respect to community compatibility, the city held 2 open houses on July 17th, 2024 at the Lorneville Community Center, and those covered both the planning application before you this evening and the environmental impact assessment that is being completed by Dylan. We've also had programming on our Shape Your City webpage, and there was also comments brought forward during the 30-day comment period for the municipal plan amendment, which are provided to the committee in their package this evening. One of the issues identified was the need for increased buffering. The original plan that was brought forth had a buffer of 30 meters along the boundary with the properties along Lorneville Road. That has been increased to 150. One of the things that was brought up was the need to mitigate risks from hazardous materials and land uses. The proposed zoning within our Spruce Lake Industrial Zone requires a risk assessment for those hazardous uses prepared by a professional and subject to the approval of city staff. And our current land use planning framework also requires additional setbacks for those hazardous industrial uses from the property lines. So there would be the 150-meter buffer, plus we would have an additional setback on the development site for those hazardous industrial uses. Community benefits was an issue that was identified. Staff are proposing that the Chief Administrative Officer and city staff review a means of providing additional community investment from the city tied to land sales from the proposed industrial park. Groundwater resources were another issue that was identified by the Lorneville community. We're proposing that the Chief Administrative Officer directs city staff to develop a groundwater monitoring program for the proposed industrial park. As well, one of the other concerns we heard from the community is, could the AIM metal shredder be relocated on this site? Our proposed zoning for the Spruce Lake Industrial Zone does not permit metal shredding as a permitted use. There are also some municipal plan policy amendments brought forward by the application. Those clarify the approach to locating industrial development inside the PDA, which is the city's servicing boundary. It also allows for heavy industrial development in the Spruce Lake and McAllister industrial parks. And it also allows for the park and natural areas designation to be utilized as a buffer between land uses. In our opinion, the proposal conforms to both the municipal plan and the provincial statements of public interest. In terms of existing zoning, the site on the western side of the road is zoned green energy, with portions of the site on the eastern side of the road zoned heavy industrial and rural. The proposed zoning for the site would see the site zoned to the new Spruce Lake Industrial Zone, which is provided in the committee's package. It's a zone that is based on the heavy industrial zone and some of our medium industrial zone standards. It provides for a mix of industrial uses. As I mentioned before, we have a prohibition on metal shredding. There's also an allowance for a new use called worker accommodations. So that allows for, if we have a large-scale industrial project, one of the things that we've seen here in St. John, particularly around some of our larger industrial operations when they do have maintenance turnarounds now, there's a large influx of workers into the community and tradespeople. So we do have an allowance worker accommodation. So if we're building a new large-scale facility out there and there is a need for worker accommodation in our limited housing market, we can allow for some form of a workers' camp on that site during construction. Again, we have the risk assessment provisions in the new zone for hazardous industrial uses, as well as the increased setbacks for hazardous and offensive uses. And that 150-meter setback, that would be zoned environmental protection along the boundary with the adjacent lands along Lorneville Road. In terms of engagement, the city held 2 open houses on July 17th, 2024. On September 25th, letters were sent to property owners within 100 meters of the subject site. And then prior to October 22nd, notice will be posted on the city's website of the public hearing upcoming at the November 12th council meeting. Staff's recommendation are to adopt the proposed amendments to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw and request that Common Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to develop the following: a groundwater monitoring program for the expansion area and a community benefits program for the Lorneville area. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Reed. I have a few questions to kick us off, I think. So you mentioned a shortage of industrial land. Can you tell me what the current net absorption rate of industrial land for the city is and how many years of inventory we have?
I think the big challenge there is it's primarily the configuration of the land. We're not well positioned for a large industrial player in size and configuration, nor are we positioned for a larger industrial park. That's our challenge. It's not so much, absorption is a question. We could run out of those pretty fast, but there's 2 things. You need the land, and then you need the land of a certain size and configuration.
So given that we're looking for large blocks of land, has the city had to turn away these large industrial players that want to operate in St. John that would necessitate rezoning this land?
I'm not aware. I'm not involved in the direct investment attraction with our industrial parks or growth group. However, we're seeking to position ourselves similar to other New Brunswick municipalities. Moncton's an example, Halifax is an example, that have shovel-ready development sites.
And thank you for transitioning neatly into my next question. I've been to Moncton, I've been to Halifax, I've been to Clayton Park and the development and the industrial developments there. Do you feel that those locations in the city are geotechnically comparable to this site? Are they, say, for example, built on wetlands with water courses next to rural residential areas?
As in Moncton compared to?
So Moncton's principal industrial parks, do they have a similar geotechnical configuration to this? Like, are they, built on a wetland near the coast, near sensitive waterways, near existing housing, or are they, out by the airport? Or in Halifax, are they out by nothing? Like I don't know if you've driven through Clayton Park in Halifax, it's near nothing except for the IKEA.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult question to compare, the location of one municipality's industrial areas to another because, each municipality is different from a geological perspective. It's St. John, we've got areas of rock and we've got, lowland areas as well, right? And, Moncton is primarily, I've worked there for many years, Moncton's primarily clay, right? It's not quite an apples and oranges comparison. And different cities have different development patterns. So it's not, again, it's an apples and oranges comparison in terms of that, surrounding development context.
And I appreciate that, but if if city staff may hold up the existence of these large blocks of industrial parks in Moncton and Halifax as a virtue, but then say it's an apples to oranges comparison, I might be a little confused. Are these parks should we be building these parks if it is an apples to oranges thing and we maybe geographically constrained from building such large expansive contiguous areas of heavy industrial zoning?
I guess the other factor here too is proximity to servicing. And the city has had Dillon Consulting complete a justification report that, provides a supporting basis for the development of these lands that's, attached as an appendix to our PAC report. So.
Okay. And one last question before I know I have Ms. McShane with her virtual hand up. So how was the 30-meter buffer determined as the sort of initial distance?
That would be a question for Dillon through their justification report. They have a representative there tonight. But, one of the things that we've heard loud and clear is that 30 meters was not a significant enough buffer. Hence, we've gone to 150.
Does the city have a standard buffer for existing industrial zoning?
No.
No. And just so for the audience, I did some quick Google Maps measurement. So for scale, 30 meters is if you live in a new suburb that was built, 70s and after, 30 meters is the width from your door to the door of your neighbor across the street. I measured from the front of my door to the end of my driveway is 25 meters. So I would imagine that would be insufficient. I also measured the 150 meters. And again, just to put that in scale, so 150 meters happens to be the exact distance from the west side of Charlotte Street to the east side of Sydney Street across King Square. So that gives you the visual scale of 150 meters. So it would be, putting an asphalt plant on the other side of King Square from St. John City Market or from the Imperial Theater. That is the visual 150 meters distance. I also measured the distance from AIM Recycling to Marketplace, the very first street. That is 200 meters. And we all know what happened at AIM Recycling. And that was an extra 50 meters. And it's certainly the hazards from that incident certainly extended beyond the first road in Lower West. I don't know if anyone here happens to live in Lower West. I live in Fundy Heights. So we had our windows closed for that period. But thank you, Mr. Reed, for that answer. I will turn it over to Ms. McShane.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mark, I just had a question about the risk assessment. What triggers a risk assessment? How volatile does the volatile have to be? And what's the highest or worst land use that would not trigger it?
The highest and worst land use. So the risk assessment would be tied to uses involving a chemical, right? So or an industrial process. Also, they could be required for uses that have a potential sound impact as well. So it's really hard to determine, given those factors. It could be the quantity of a particular chemical. Different chemicals have different exposure risks. Some are subject to fire and explosion. Others are, subject to a toxic cloud, for example. So there's different standards based on professional guidance for those types of chemicals and
Okay, the reason I'm asking is if the risk assessment is proposed as a condition, right, for a recommendation, and it's supposed to be a basic a catch-all or a safeguard of some sort for carte blanche heavy industrial approvals on that land. I'm trying to look how much of a safeguard is it, and who's applying it? What's the rigor behind it? Yeah.
It's commonly applied in a lot of Alberta jurisdictions that do involve hazardous and heavier land uses. The idea came to us. There was actually policy in the plan that supported it back in 2014, 2015, when we brought out the new zoning bylaw, we engaged a consultant out of Alberta who's both a planner and an engineer. Don't know who would want to go that particular career route, but that's beside the point. And we brought him in, given our heavy industrial base in the city, and at that time, there was talk around the Energy East pipeline and the fertilizer plant. So we had those projects on the horizon. So he was brought in to give us some guidance on that. And it did find its way into the municipal plan, but it was never really operationalized through our zoning because those two large industrial projects, Energy East and the fertilizer plant, didn't come to fruition. But, there is a process for this. It would involve a review by planning staff and fire and emergency services. And as well, if we need additional resources on that, we would hire a consultant to do an independent peer review, just so that we would have a better understanding of what the proponents' consultants were bringing forward.
Okay, but at this time, we don't have like a clear sense of this is the line where a risk assessment would be required. That's something that would have to be.
No. It depends on the type and the quantity of chemical and the exact use. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for now. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. McShane. Mr. Como, I saw your digital hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sticking with what Mrs. McShane was talking about and the risk, the assessments. Increased sound, definitely, when you look at what you were saying, 150 meters, sound travels a lot more than 150 meters, so that's concerning. Fire explosion, another big one. My question for you, Mark, would be, most of this is medium industrial. There's a few heavy industrial. Can you just tell us what the difference might be, just for me, yeah, for the committee, and for everybody who's here?
So generally, light and medium, those are uses that are contained within a building. Maybe they have some degree of outdoor storage. But the heavier ones, our zoning bylaw, when we define heavy industrial uses, we have two sub-definitions. We have a volatile industrial use, and those are the ones that involve the hazardous processes and chemicals. So petrochemical plant, one of the ones we flagged would be a bulk fuel storage depot, like a tank farm. Uses of that nature where you're either processing dangerous chemicals or storing dangerous chemicals. And then that second subset is what we call an obnoxious industrial use. So those are things, brewery is a prime example because that might have a smell, or a scrapyard would be another one because, there's noise and there's a large visual impact. But, like I said before, one of the things we heard, there's some concern in the community that could this be a second location for Maine? And what we've done is we've prohibited scrap and salvage yards on this use. So there's really two things. There's the hazardous chemicals, and then there's the noise or the obnoxious or objectionable effects like sound or smell, or something that isn't hazardous to life but does pose a nuisance.
And the mediums, you have examples of the mediums?
A lot of the mediums, it could be something that, has a large amount of outdoor storage that could be easily screened, right? Something like maybe a lumber yard or, sawmill or, something along those lines where there's a large degree of outdoor storage that some folks could be, they could be considered unsightly. A lot of the light stuff and some of the medium tends to be able to be contained within a building, but then some of that medium industrial uses do have components of the use that extend beyond the building and, could produce an objectionable effect to adjacent receptors.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Councilor Lowe?
Yeah. Community benefits, could you go into detail about that?
Yes. One of the things we heard is that over the years, that community hasn't received a lot of benefit. That's something that I think has been mentioned in many of the letters that were received during the 30-day comment period, as well as, what we heard during the 2 open houses. So, one of the things that we've proposed is that the city manager, council direct the chief administrative officer and city staff to develop a community benefits program that, once the industrial park is established, that, it could be something as a portion of land sales get dedicated to a community fund that is then spent on community projects. It's something that we've flagged for further investigation by city staff.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Do we have any other questions for city staff at this time from PAC? Yes, Mr. Pappas, please go ahead.
Mark, just to clarify, so is the green buffer strip now LPP?
It could be taken, once subdivision does occur, that could be an option to vest that buffer strip as LPP, then it would be essentially dedicated parkland. That could be an option, but this current application does not involve subdivision.
Okay, so it becomes a buffer zone,
Yeah.
not LPP.
No.
So as a buffer zone or LPP, if somebody comes in for a specific use and it is a noise creating facility, is the setback now from the buffer LPP?
The setback would now be from that buffer zone.
So that gets extended
Yeah.
to whatever the requirement is for.
Yeah, so there's essentially 2 buffers. There's the buffer on the ground that is designated park and natural area and zoned environmental protection, which does not permit industrial uses. And then you have a second setback measured from that boundary.
Right, so in a medium industrial zone, what's the setback from that buffer or LPP?
It could be, as low as 7.5 or 15 meters, or it could be up to 150, depending if it's, a more hazardous or obnoxious use.
Okay, thank you.
It ranges depending on the type of
I
use.
just wanted to bring that up because I don't think it was clear in all the letters I wrote that I read from all the residents.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. Any other questions for city staff at this time? Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Now I'll call on the applicant to speak. Keep in mind that you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Please state your name for the record and let us know if you're in favor of staff's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jennifer Brown. I'm with Dilling Consulting. Nice to see you all this evening. I am not going to present. I think Mark Reed did a very substantial job here presenting the application as well as answering your questions. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have with reference to the justification report. I'm also accompanied by one of the leads on the environmental assessment work that was done by Dilling Consulting as well. Bethany Francis is joining us virtually. Should you have any questions about that process, we're prepared to answer them this evening. To answer your question, Mr. Chair, we do agree with staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. I believe we have a question from Ms. McShane for you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Jen, I had a quick question. I want to talk about the land that was on the opposite side of King William Road that's currently zoned green energy. In the report, it's like everyone keeps talking about you can't develop industrial in that land because it needs to have a 750 to 100 meter thing, but it says it's from habitable buildings, which I thought meant people live there, not like, so can you maybe explain some of that? to me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. McShane. So habitable buildings essentially will mean anybody is inside the building for a prolonged period of time,
Okay.
which would suggest that from building code perspective, there's a requirement for increased safety.
So even if
it
they're
may not
working
be
there-
it's not necessarily a residential building.
Yep.
It's just a building that has people in it for a prolonged period of time.
Oh, it's such a shame on that side. Anyway, I like a windmill, but anyway. The other question I have is about supply. So in our municipal plan, LU4, it speaks about, there needs to be adequate supply before you're triggering municipal plan change. So I read through the Dillon report, wonderful, and it speaks to some of the comparable cities, and it talks about like how much industrial land that they're adding. What no one speaks to is like what everybody already has.
Right.
So when I look at maps of what's currently assessed as industrial in St. John, it's significant. And I mean, I had a conversation with somebody around the table where they said, we have one industrial park. I said, no. And they said, two. I said, no. I said, three. I said, no. And we have Ashburn Lake Road, we got the refinery, we got JDI, we got Lancaster Logistics Park, we've got Canaport. And if you look at that on a map of what's assessed, it's significant. And when you compare it to what's assessed in Moncton, it's a significant departure. So when we have conversations about trying to beat Moncton to the punch of racing to win the supply race, I think we won already. While I know most of it's not accessible, I need to speak from a residential perspective. All of this is available to be heavy industrial, whether the city can access it or not. So the land use implications are quite large and they're significant. So have we done a study of what that looks like, what our land use that is currently assessed as industrial had, because it could build out by right, so to speak. I mean, if it has some EIAs, but anyway, maybe, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. McShane, there has been a study, it should be amended to the package. Deloitte undertook a study, I believe it was for Envision St. John, that did discuss the current supply of industrial lands.
Yeah.
And that's where this recommendation comes in part from, and that's where, a lot of this information was informed, a lot of that information from the Deloitte report informed council's decision to prioritize this as part of their catalytic projects.
I can only find it in terms of industrial parks, and I can only find it in terms of adding industrial
Right.
lands, not in terms of our current inventory citywide.
I think there's the big kind of point here is there is something to be said for private versus public ownership and the ability for St. John to attract more industrial or business based on lands that they have control over.
Right.
So there may be industrial lands, and there's a smattering Mark mentioned in his presentation that there is not necessarily a contiguous representation of available lands, but most of that land that's sitting in that inventory, the city doesn't have easy access to. What the city is seeking out through this application and through the land transfer with RDC is increased access and control.
Right, to have like attractive pads to offer as inventory.
Exactly. So I think it's, there is some complexity in the conversation. Obviously, this is not a straight and narrow application. This is obviously a very big and hefty decision here before you. But I do think when we look at what's available to the city, it's very minimal. And the city wants to be able to use that in a very catalytic way. They're going to need to have increased control over those lands to use that as a selling point.
I appreciate everything you're saying. I'm going to leave this just as my lens for the evening for how I'm looking at this. I do think that we already have a significant amount of industrial land that is zoned industrial. I also know that, because I checked this with the Commissioner of Finance, of our property tax revenue that we get, only 9% of it comes from heavy industry. 62% of it comes from residential property taxes. Heavy industrial negatively affects that moneymaker, residential. So I have a concern with how we weight some of these things as we make decisions. So I will say that freely, as that is my lens for this evening as we kind of have this discussion, because that's a hurdle for me. Yeah, thank you though, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. McShane. I will remind the gallery, please refrain from any clapping, applause, noise, or anything like that. I'm sure Ms. McShane appreciates the sentiment, but in order to keep decorum and order, I will have to give all of you one strike. Thank you, Ms. McShane. Do we have any other questions for the applicant at this time? No. Thank you very much. Ms. Brown, you may take a seat. I'm sure we will call you back for questions in the future. So I will now move on to the public hearing for this item. So we've had long sessions like this before, and if you raise a pertinent question, what we're going to do is we're all taking copious notes and noting the questions. We don't want to sort of interrupt the flow by you asking a question, us saying, oh, that's a very good question, and then us calling city staff or the applicant back up and then having them sit down and then have you guys come back up. So we're going to, I don't want anyone in the audience to think that if you come up and you voice your concern and we say thank you next, that we have dismissed your concern or your opinion. It will be duly considered. That being said, I would invite anyone in the audience to please come to the podium. If we have a large amount of people that want to speak, we could maybe form a line. But anyone who wants to rush to the podium right now, there's no line. And if I could get you to please state your name and civic address for the record, please.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Sear with Envision St. John. Sorry for jumping ahead. I figured given the nature of the questions, it might be worthwhile for me to jump next. Just Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the committee. Again, with Envision St. John, I'm the executive director of our real estate, economic intelligence, as well as our industrial investment attraction kind of departments within the organization. And we're here to speak in favor of the application for the expansion of the Spruce Lake Industrial Park. And I can get into some of the details that you guys were looking at around what some of these opportunities are, what they need, and why we think that this application is important. Just a little bit of context, how do we fit in to this process, and why do we bring certain, what information can we bring? Generally speaking, our role and our services role is to be kind of the lead at the region and kind of communicating and pitching the region with regards to the value proposition, why we're a good place to locate. More specifically, we're a bit more of the boots on the ground, working with our partners at the federal government as well as the provincial government, who are looking at significant major foreign direct investment opportunities. So really, we get into a lot of what we call growth readiness or investment readiness, making sure that we've got land supply, we've got infrastructure, we've got the labor to support these applications and ensure that what we're putting forward is viable and what we're putting forward is something that can resonate with businesses that are looking to invest. And right now, what I'd say is we have been getting a significant uptake in terms of the interest in activity from a foreign direct investment, particularly in the industrial space, to the extent that we have not seen before. Really what we're seeing is kind of the convergence of a few things all at the same time. One, which is the energy transition. The world has to move to new energy sources. It means a lot of different things in the supply chain, different supply chains, different products. They all need to adapt and they all need to change. And the investments that are going to happen to make this transition are on the horizon. We're starting to see that the last year or so in particular. And there's significant interest and there's going to be significant opportunity in the next number of years. This is happening at the same time that the world is changing. We're seeing significant changes in global supply chains post-COVID. People are trying to strengthen and de-risk their supply chains, particularly in the advanced manufacturing sectors where skilled labor is required. There's significantly more interest now in relocating a lot of industry back to North America, back closer to markets, to capitalize both on a safer supply chain as well as the skilled labor we have. This is compounded with the third factor, which is kind of another big part of the game changer, is that industrial land is becoming much more scarce in North America. So post-COVID, what's happened? The same time as we're starting to see interest in reshoring, There's been changes in retail and wholesale and distribution. The mentality has gone from what we would call just in time, where major retailers, major businesses want to keep just enough inventory to get them by, to a just in case, where people want more, where people want resiliency. They want redundancy in case there's supply chain delays or shocks. So what this has done nationally and in North America is it has boosted significant demand for warehousing. It's been eating up a lot of industrial land. Industrial land prices have been increasing substantially, to the extent that you're well over $1 million, $1.5 million an acre in the GTA. You're looking at 700,000+ in major centers in Alberta. Even Halifax and Moncton are starting to get pretty high. And so what this has also done is it's made Thornville a more challenging area to develop. That really wasn't something that was resonating with industrial players, that the feds in the province would be soliciting. Cost effective. It now makes sense. And the key asset is it's all under control as well. So again, some major considerations that we think are important to consider. I know there's a lot of difficult discussion around industrial and how its role that it's played in the city. At the end of the day, it is a big part of our economic base, and it is a big part of how we'll have the economic base growth that will support future growth of the region in the future. The key is that it's got to be in the right places, and it's got to be handled. It's got to be handled sensitively. And so from that standpoint, best case scenario, we get this towards the edges of the city in areas right on the edge of servicing. From that standpoint, like as we see our population grow, and we have been, it is not just in St. John, in New Brunswick as well. It has been outpacing economic growth significantly. GDP has been pretty flat, yet population is growing. Right now, backfilling the labor force, it's great, it's going to continue, but we do have to think about economic growth for the medium and long term as well, which is why the current opportunity we think is so critical for the region. But it is an uphill battle, bringing major investors and major industries to the region. The first thing is that a lot of times site selectors, major companies, the map ends at Quebec usually. So there's a little bit of a hill that we have to get up and over. We're starting to do that. We're getting a lot more traction. But there are a lot of things that really we need to be marketable. One is size. So what we're seeing a lot of inquiries. The smaller ones, meaningful ones we're working on are probably 50 acres. We're seeing quite a number that are 75, 100 acres plus. And we just don't have anywhere with sites that large. The next one is services. In terms of the industries that make sense for St. John, a lot of them may need raw water supply, which right now, the only industrial park that's got it with any size is Lornville. It's got the Spruce Lake raw water, runs to Colson Cove. Power, three-phase power is a huge demand. As we transition to green energy, industry is becoming more and more reliant on electrical power rather than other forms of on-site generation. And right now, there's not a lot of areas in the city that have the transmission capacity to support this. So like right now, in terms of any major industrial opportunity that we're working with the feds in the province on, Lornville is really one of the only games in town that we have because it's the only one that's got the transmission capacity and, the potential for electrical transmission capacity anytime in the next number of years. And then the last one is approvals and speed. I would say a lot of the market right now are racing. They're chasing changes in demand, changes in the market, and finding a path to minimize some of the upfront risk. Obviously, things would still go through full EIAs and that sort of thing, but to minimize the upfront risk around at what point can you start grading a site to get it ready is going to be critical, because quite frankly, a lot of the other alternatives are areas with flatter land, not as many development constraints that we'd be competing with nationally, internationally. And so from our perspective, being able to start work to prepare a site, if we are successful with something, is going to be a critical part of the pitch. So from that standpoint, we do see ourselves kind of in a new world right now. We think that this could be a game changer for the region. We just have not seen this type of activity in my career. And there's just not really anywhere else for it to go right now. Spruce Lake is really the only area that can check the boxes technically, and to reproduce what we can do at Spruce Lake somewhere else, we're in the order of magnitude of hundreds of millions of dollars. So for that reason, we think that this is an important decision. We think that this is going to have a significant impact for the city. We're very, very optimistic about the potential to successfully attract someone here, and it's really the only area that we can actually pitch right now. I can open for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Mr. Sear. I believe we have a couple of questions from you. I saw Ms. McShane's hand first. Ms. McShane?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you're the right person I should ask this question to, Jeff. I'm going to shoot for it anyway. So Lornville specifically, they had a barge facility that didn't go through. There had a bunch of land got expropriated. It didn't happen. Then they had the second barge terminal, which was supposed to promise 450 jobs by 2020, which has been used once or twice. We have industrial park that's there with lots that aren't for sale because now we realize the market has moved and they need larger lots. Why is Envision, which is, I respect that it's more regional in nature. I have a couple of part questions here. Why are we sure this plan is the one that will finally trickle down success for the neighborhood?
I guess the way I would position that, and I didn't run all those past projects.
Yeah, no,
but,
for sure.
Historically, we've been in St. John, we've been in a position where our population has been stagnant, it's been declining. We've been trying to stir things up. We've been trying to make things happen. A lot of those initiatives were more so trying to create economic growth when there wasn't. What I would say the difference from my perspective on this is not necessarily being proactive. We're being reactive. We're starting to get these opportunities, and we're trying to react to them so that we don't miss them.
Okay, and the other question is, you talk about GDP, and GDP doesn't mean a thing for City Hall books, nothing. So do we have a sense of jobs created or residents that might be attracted, but as a ratio even, to the city directly versus the region? Because the regional numbers don't pay the St. John bills.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because we are answering it kind of on spec a little bit. Generally speaking, job densities that we've seen, and I can't get into specifics, but they can range from. If you don't mind 1 second, I just want to use my calculator here. They can range from something like, I would say, 5 to maybe about 15 jobs per acre is kind of what we've been seeing. A lot of them would have buffer space that's not productive site and that sort of thing as well. Generally speaking, the multipliers are pretty significant in industrial uses. These uses will still bring in millions of dollars of tax revenue, but Additionally, what will happen as well is they'll create
Spin-offs.
They'll create spin-offs, but they'll also create demand for new housing in St. John from the economic growth and the growth in housing demand for workers. And the positive news is that the way the housing market has been changing, like St. John has the services to support residential growth. Like if it happens, it's well positioned to capture a much larger share of residential growth stemming from industrial development than.
I hope you're talking a ways out, because we were here a couple of meetings ago and you were saying how far behind we were in housing inventory. So,
We are, yeah.
Okay, okay. I just want to be sure, okay. Oh, that's good for me from now, I appreciate it.
And you have
Yeah.
to kind of, as well,
Yeah.
too, like, anything here, like, these things will take time. Like,
Yeah.
it's approvals for environmental, for project would still be, up to a year. Construction timelines would be quite a long time. So when we start thinking about this now, we're really, opening day, we're talking about the mid-range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McShane. Mr. Pappas?
Hi, Jeff. What type of businesses are you getting inquiries from, or what do you envision the market being for this park?
I do have to be a little bit cautious and high level on this one, just because we do deal with a lot of confidentiality and NDAs on.
But there's a
foreign
lot
direct
of different types of sectors. I mean, are we getting heavy industrial? Are we getting more technology?
I would say what we're getting is a mix. So generally speaking, like we see some interest in the energy sector. Advanced manufacturing is probably a fairly strong one that we're seeing that would be a fit for Laurenville. And they can range. Like there's more and more of these opportunities that are getting, I would say, like, we've seen some where they propose to even manage all the CO2 under the roof, and there's not any emissions from it. So it varies. It's hard to give an exact answer, but we've seen a range of energy, advanced manufacturing. There's probably the big one. Logistics, supply chain type stuff as well is another interesting area with the port locally.
Warehousing?
Warehousing, yeah. Yeah, right now we've got one of the lowest available warehousing inventories in the
And that's
country.
why I ask, because I'm on the front lines of that, and we have none.
Yeah.
Basically. And that's why my question, if it's low impact development, I'm just for the sake of the neighbors, or high impact, it makes a big difference. And
Yeah, and likely we've got demand for both.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pappas. Ms. Eldemir?
Yeah. Hi, Jeff. Do you think that the city has the capability to serve this kind of industry during the infrastructures that we have right now? Electricity, roads, everything.
Yeah, just to answer that question, in Laurenville, in the Spruce Lake Industrial Park, yes. Right now, probably the only area that we've got that capacity in particular. There's limitations right now in terms of energy transmission capacity for significant industrial uses on the east side of the city. We don't know when that will be resolved, but that type of solution is usually years in planning and implementation. Raw water side, again, raw water runs in Spruce Lake. It stops at, I believe, Champlain Heights around the refinery area on the east side. So, right now in terms of having the available land, particularly land under control, which makes us more desirable, and these critical services, this is the only area that we really got to pitch these types of opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eldemir. While I have the mic, I have a couple quick questions for you, Mr. Sears. So I know there's already an existing swath of heavy industrial zoning down King William, and it's currently all just vacant trees right now, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So I guess I don't understand. If we have this demand, is that like why do we have all of this vacant land out there if there's this demand?
And this is a new trend. So really what I would say is it's been something that's been starting to form post-COVID and has kind of significantly accelerated after the war in Ukraine, is just this shift to reshoring. We're really at the early point in which major investments are being made in the energy transition. Obviously, some of them are coming a little bit slower than initially expected, but from our perspective, working with Opportunities New Brunswick and Invest Canada, like in terms of the number of inquiries we had, before this, it was very minimal. Now it's to the extent where I've actually brought on another staff member to help us manage these inquiries. It's new though. It takes time. There's slow processes. We're really at the front end of this change. And as we've been experiencing this significant increase in inquiries, what we've been realizing is like we are nowhere near ready for it. And so this is part of trying to get ready for this change.
Thank you. I'm actually headed to Ottawa tomorrow to discuss the critical minerals sector within Arcan. So I'm glad to hear it's on the radar with Envision and out here as well. So going back to the question I had asked Mr. Reed earlier, has Envision St. John heard from any major players that you've had to turn down to say, sorry, we can't accommodate you. We don't have a 200-acre block of heavy industrial land for you. You have to go, you have to go to Moncton, you have to go to Halifax, you have to go to Boston.
Yeah, what I would say to that is we haven't turned anyone down because we've talked to them about Lornville and just said it would require rezoning. If we couldn't, it would probably be in the double digits or higher.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Reed?
Yeah. I guess the other question, just to reiterate one of the points that Jeff made around the land availability. Today, this land is owned by the RDC in the province, so it's not the city's land to sell. So that's the other challenge there that answers the question, why haven't we seen development when we've had folks knocking on our door? And, part of this is to transact the land from RDC to the city in a sizable enough portion that allows us to develop an industrial park to capture some of this interest that's coming our way.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Reed. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Sear at this time from committee? Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Sear. We appreciate it. Yeah. All right, I'm just keeping on time. My apologies. Do we have, I would like to invite more comments. If anyone from the floor, if anyone from the public wishes to speak, please come forward. Yes, sir. And again, just a quick reminder, if you could please state your name and civic address for the minutes, please.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, my name is Shane Galbraith. I live at 921 Manawaganus Road, and I'm here to, I guess, make a presentation on behalf of community of Lornville. There will be a presentation of slides first, and that'll go over sort of the general comments. They're general, and there's at least 7 speakers, I think, that we would like to present after me, and there may be more from the floor. So anyhow, I'll just get started. I guess if you'd indulge me, I'll see if I can get the presentation started first. Well, it's set up here someplace. Okay.
is familiar?
Just bring the, no, this one here.
Right here?
I think that's it, yeah. Okay, and we'll just kick the.
There you go.
Okay, that's the first slide of the presentation, but before I would go into that, the first thing I'd like to do is read the letter that I had sent to, if you'll, I guess, accommodate me, is there's a couple of things and a couple of comments on the some of the earlier presentation that heard this evening. So proposed municipal plan amendment, this is your worship and councilors, July 26, 2024. Proposed municipal plan amendment, expansion of Spruce Lake Industrial Park, item 10.2, July 8th, 2024 meeting of Common Council. I am strongly opposed to the above municipal plan amendments and rezoning of lands related to the proposed Spruce Lake Industrial Park expansion project presented at the July 8th meeting of Common Council. My concerns are the negative impacts this project, as it's currently proposed, and the enabling amendments will have on the environment and on the community of Lorneville and its residents, their quality of life, residential property values, and associated tax base. I also have concerns about the process and communication. And back then, it's like, what is the apparent rush to put this through? Anyhow, the majority of the area proposed to be rezoned to heavy industrial is not currently in the municipal plan primary development area. Designating all lands between King William Road and residences on Lorneville Road to heavy industrial is not reasonable and unnecessary. It's also completely at odds with the input, effort, consideration, and thought given in the comprehensive planning process that led to adoption of the municipal plan and zoning bylaw in 2012. Notice of the expansion project and associated EIA process was first given to affected Lorneville residents on July 3rd. The same notice indicated that the initial phase of the project involving 110 hectares of land was planned for 2024. The registered EIA document, page 15, indicates the beginning of phase one is scheduled for September 2024. Now that seems like a fairly rushed process from the initial notification. This EIA only deals with the first phase of the Spruce Lake Industrial Park expansion. While it covers 17% of the proposed expansion being 1,580 acres, phase one is a huge and expensive undertaking, although we don't know what the cost of that is yet, in itself. 132 acres of wetland will be lost if approved to go ahead. Continuing this phased approach to development will only lead to more environmental degradation and loss. A more comprehensive EIA and planning exercise should be undertaken on the whole parcel of land to determine where appropriate areas for development exist and what areas should be set aside for more passive uses. So that went to council, and the reason why I'm reading it is that at the council meeting, there were about 315 pages of opposition letters, and I think probably a lot of those comments could be lost in that. But certainly that's the amount if you print it off. The other thing is, I think I'd just like to take a moment and talk about the existing municipal plan. I might have misheard, but I thought I heard it said earlier this evening, I may be wrong, that the plan recommendations, the zoning recommendations, the change to the municipal plan and the future use plan and the zoning amendments are in line somehow with the current municipal plan or the direction of the municipal plan. That's really, I guess that'll be part of the argument tonight, that they're directly opposed to that. And I'd just like to read also, when Plan St. John was adopted in 2012, this is the acknowledgement at the beginning of that plan. Plan St. John sets a new direction for St. John's future looking forward to 2035. Key to the process to develop the municipal plan was the significant volunteer effort of the Plan St. John Citizen Advisory Committee, CAC, of which there are 2 members on Planning Advisory here this evening. The committee acted as champions for the municipal plan, guiding the success of the extensive Plan St. John community engagement process. The committee met regularly throughout the 2-year process to develop the municipal plan. They are to be commended for pushing the envelope of this municipal plan towards a bold and innovative vision for the city's future. They acted as community ambassadors of the plan, actively promoting public involvement, considering all of the inputs from the community and from the extensive research completed throughout the process. The Plan St. John's CAC has fulfilled its mandate to Common Council, delivering a leading-edge, made in St. John municipal plan, which leaves a strong legacy for the future. It is with the greatest respect that we acknowledge their tremendous commitment to this process. The city also wishes to recognize the commitment made by the thousands of community members who actively participated in Plan St. John, ensuring that this plan captured the vision, hopes, and passions citizens have for St. John. The work of the CAC was supported by a Plan St. John steering committee made up of senior staff across the organization, along with a dedicated team of professional planners. They provided valuable technical expertise, ensuring that the plan creates a solid foundation for guiding the city's operations in all areas which supports Plan St. John. The team wishes to acknowledge their leadership on behalf of the organization in ensuring this is truly an integrated and holistic plan which will guide the management of the city for many years to come. So that's the acknowledgement. I'll just read a section from the executive summary that, as it pertains to a place like Lorneville. Under the city structure and land use portion of the plan, page 2, one of the comments there is protecting the rural landscape and natural areas by identifying areas outside the primary development area as rural stable, rural settlement, rural resource, rural industrial, and park and natural area. And I'll read that again. It says protecting the rural landscape and natural areas by identifying areas outside the primary development area as rural stable, rural settlement, rural resource, rural industrial, and park and natural areas. Now, one of the largest areas behind the Lorneville community at this point is in the development plan is designated rural resource. Okay, I guess that's, there might be one other comment, I guess. There's a lot of, a lot of comment in the 2 reports that received here this morning, this evening that's been submitted by the city staff and by, I guess, the proponent, Dillon Consulting. I don't know how many references are to EIA and how the EIA is going to protect the environment and how it's going to be totally regulated. There won't be any difficulties that accrue to that. There's a substantial input to the EIA, but again, and you'll see later in the slides, it appears that the EIA has been rushed through quite quickly to try and support these zoning changes. So again, it itself is quite rushed, and the report is extensive, but I'll just read a section from the letter I had sent to the EIA. This is to Dillon Consulting, July 31st, 2024. To whom it may concern, input to the June 2024 EIA, Spruce Lake Industrial Park Expansion Project. Please forward this cover letter and the enclosure attachment in its entirety to the New Brunswick Department of Environment Local Government Technical Review Committee as feedback on the EIA process and registration document. The EIA only deals with the first phase of the planned Spruce Lake Industrial Park project. This is about 17% of the whole 688 hectare parcel, which is subject to the planning changes.
I'm sorry, sir. This is your 2-minute warning.
Pardon me?
This is your 2-minute warning for time.
I can't hear you.
This is your 2-minute warning for time. You have 2 minutes left.
Oh, would you want me to go to the presentation
It's your 10 minutes.
Pardon?
I said it's your 10 minutes. You have 2 minutes left of your 10 minutes.
From 10 minutes, okay. Appears that it's lost again. It's showing up on the laptop, but it is not on the screen.
Can we get some technical assistance to the podium?
Pardon me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this is the presentation. Municipal plan changes are there to increase primary development area, PDA, support proposed park expansion. It's increased designated heavy industrial area on Schedule B, future land use plan to support proposed park expansion. It's a major departure from the municipal plan adopted in 2012. In this plan, it shows this is one of the slides that the city presented at the open house and was held in Lornville, July 17th. This area in gray, down along King William Road on both sides, is the current municipal plan heavy industrial designation. Includes current Spruce Lake Industrial Park, but the expansion area is from Paddy's Hill Road down this way. The area proposed for inclusion in the heavy industrial area is this particular area here. And it's up against, at that time, it showed 30 meters behind the community of Lornville. So the primary development area, the current acreage there is 800 acres in that area. It's proposed to add 1,049 acres to make it a total of 1,849. The current designated heavy industrial area along King William Road, the expansion zone, is 867 acres, 606 acres west of King William Road and 261 acres east. The additional area proposed for the heavy industrial is 1,005 acres east towards Lornville residential property lines for a total of 872 acres. Concerns with the plan changes. Area for inclusion in industrial designation and PDA is too large and unnecessary for the proposed project. Phase 1 is the proposed project right now. It will negatively impact the residential property values and tax base. It will result in more unnecessary environmental degradation and lower quality of life. It's against the principles established by Plan St. John. Process has been rushed and not transparent, not necessary to support reasonable expansion of industrial lands. That's the plan changes that have been proposed here this evening. This is the area that is involved in that this forested area that was spoken of earlier, and the main harbor in Lornville and the provincially significant wetland. This is all of the area that's proposed for industrial expansion. This would be designated as currently designated rural resource. That will be, if this plan was followed, or these recommendations are followed, that's the area, and this area down in the corner here as well, that's the area that'll be become heavy industrial. This is the area that on the other side from Stony Creek, and this goes over to the mill side, this is the area that's proposed for heavy industrial expansion. And you see this cleared area already behind there. I'm not sure if that's currently included in the, that's a 35 acre parcel. Most of the, or that is 35 acres is all in the designated heavy industrial area. And again, this area is designated heavy industrial along here as well. But That's not in the wetland. That could be gone already. Same thing, I guess this shows the area of, this is the Riptide International, that area has been, it's a laydown area for the port, all the containers that come in. This is the current metal recycling faction that's going there. This is the former landfill site, Spruce Lake landfill. That's a 36 hectare site that is not really useful for much else. I guess they fly airplanes, model airplanes there. This section right across from this cleared section is New Leaf Environmental and Green for Life property. So this particular section, there was a slice that was owned by JTR. And the question would be, why when we look at buying this section, it could be contingent with that. It seems to be, it's being used for it's a waste site. It's industrial demolition. That's what it's used for. It could be a much more valuable use if it was included for heavy industrial expansion. This is the area that the project is recommended, where we have a section here that's outside the current heavy industrial zone. Most of it is within the current heavy industrial zone. There's a little piece down here. This is the section that the city owns. So there's all kinds of property down here and along this side, and why isn't that considered? Why wasn't some of the other uses in Spruce Lake Industrial Park considered? There's another 11 acres that's tied up with the W&S contaminated material storage. This is the area that Dillon Consulting has found that is wetland. Now, these areas along the outside in sand colored, those are provincially mapped wetlands. This was what Dillon found to be wetland areas. So basically, mostly everything that's in that proposed first phase is wetland. Okay, concerns about the expansion project. Negative impact on residential property values and tax base between Stinson's Brook and Mill Creek. And the tax base in that area is currently $10 million. Provincial negative impacts to surface water, groundwater, and well water quality. Reduced quality of life and lifestyle impacts. Concerns at Mill Creek Crossing and flooding. Traffic concerns in King William Road, only one way in and out. Concerns for the expansion project. It's a rush timeline. I think this project, again, it was first come out to Lorneville residents July the 3rd. And here we are going towards major changes to the community plan and to the community and the land around the community. There's a lack of transparency. What are the costs and benefits? I would expect that there would have been one someplace here this evening or prior that says this is what's going to cost, this is the benefit. All we have is we need more property. Well, how much? Were there any other alternatives considered? Then we have the history of projects in Lorneville and Greater St. John. Environmental impact assessment has been rushed and is flawed as a result. Now, I read beforehand, but there's more. It could be the input to the assessment process is not leaving an idea that it'll be protected. So the timeline, April 11th and 17th, formal request for land transfer from the city to the province. April, May, June, Dillon Consulting doing the EIA. June 11th, environmental impact assessment was registered. June 17th, council votes to expand the Spruce Lake Industrial Park. June 18th, application by RDC to St. John Planning for expansion project. July 3rd, notice received by Lorneville residents, EI report available on the website. July 8th, council meeting presentation of projects and notice of plan amendments. Open house in Lorneville, July 17th, deadline for input to council. August the 7th, deadline for input to EIA, August 16th. August 19th, council meeting, proposed land changes referred to PAC. September, This was the proposed start of work on the project in the EIA, and on the and the notice that was kind of went out to Lornville. October 8th, there was a meeting of PAC, and then November 12th, public hearing at council. Now, originally, the hearing at council was designated for October the 8th. So there's history. And again, somebody's mentioned AIM, and well, it's not going to go there, and I think that misses the point. At some point in St. John, people thought AIM was a good idea. I remember working here, and there was a lot of concern to get power there in 2011. But that project, I mean, it had support, and it was going to create jobs, and give it its due, he created jobs. Mill Creek Crossing, 2011. LNG, that's another project that, it went, but it was with a fair subsidy in terms of property tax, capped at $500,000 for 20 years. The barge terminal, there was one barge terminal started in Lornville. Now there's a second one. Spruce Lake Industrial and Landfill, 1978. One of my first jobs at the city was dealing with a problem at the Spruce Lake Industrial Park where it had gone across and blocked a stream, created a lake on the upside, which we had to divert. No Wawa or whatever at that time. Spruce Lake Industrial Park, New Leaf Environmental, I mentioned that, and the W&S grounds there. Those are areas that could be used for industrial. That is the Mill Stream.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We've been very generous with time
Okay.
on this piece. I'd ask you to wrap it up very quickly in the next 30 to 60 seconds.
Okay.
We are at 20 minutes now on this piece, and I realize you are speaking for the community, which is why we've extended
This is
additional latitude on this, but I would
Thank
ask
you.
you to please wrap up your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just show some slides at the end of Mill Creek Crossing and the damages there. This is the barge terminal at Colson Cove. There was money spent. It was intended to go there, but it's still in a state where it could be enhanced. Marsh Brook Crossing, 3 years with a Bailey Bridge. Again, that's the province. That's not the city. Alternatives, lands west of King William Road, city-owned lots east of King William Road, Spruce Lake Industrial Park, existing vacant lands, New Leaf Environmental Construction Site, lands east of Alloy Drive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thorough presentation. Do we have any questions for the speaker at this time? No, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We will now adjourn for 10 minutes. We're slightly past our targeted break at 7:30. We will reconvene at 10 to 8. Thank you very much, everyone. If I can ask everyone to please take their seats so we can resume the meeting. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. I apologize for the extended 4-minute delay in reconvening. I'll make sure we add that to the end of the allotted time for comments. To quickly summarize, we've already heard several issues raised by the public, including EIA timelines, traffic, air quality, water quality, general environmental impacts, impacts to property values and the natural area, and questions regarding the examination of other alternatives to the Spruce Lake site. If anyone wishes to raise any additional points to those already covered, I would like to invite anyone from the public to please approach the podium and you may speak to the committee. And if I could have you please state your name and civic address for the record.
Yeah. My name is Leah Alexander. Good evening, PAC members. My name is Leah Alexander, and I have lived in Lorneville my entire life. I am a fifth-generation Lorneville resident, and there I plan to stay, 3 houses away from the house where I grew up, raising my 2 children on the same beach I was raised on. The concern that ruminates throughout our community is how the destruction of this wetland and how future development will affect the quality and quantity of our drinking water as we rely on wells. The City of St. John and Dillon Consulting have tried to placate our fears by stating we don't know what development is going there and they will have to meet standards. This just shows that the function and importance of this wetland is not understood by the consulting company. The Spruce Lake landfill was closed in 1997 after years of significant pushback and protest from the community. The people of Lorneville have and continue to see negative effects from the dump and its poor management. Mitigations that were promised to prohibit negative effects downstream waterways were not put into place or fails. And residents saw streams once full of fish, now empty of the same. A walk around the dump today or even a look at Google Maps and you can see the leachate runoff that has never been properly dealt with. The 50 hectares of wetland within Phase 1, as well as the yet unmeasured wetland enveloped in this larger proposed redesignation and rezoning amendment properties act as a safeguard for residents' wellfield. It is well known that wetlands play a major role in filtering water and storing pollutants. We have very valid fears that the removal of this wetland will contaminate our wellfield past the point of use or repair. The overview of the New Brunswick Wellfield Protection Program states that, quote, it costs much more, sometimes 200 times more, to clean a contaminated municipal wellfield or to find an alternate water supply than to protect the well properly in the first place. I understand that this program protects only public water sources, but then who protects our drinking water, where the principles remain the same? I am utterly confused how such a large financial risk could be taken without proper assessment. The issue of dump runoff was never mentioned in the EIA, and proper assessment of wells that may be affected was not complete. In the packet that you received, Dillon Consulting states that Phase 1 expansion and construction will, quote, disturb 53.59 hectares of wetland, unquote. It will be more than disturbed. It will be utterly erased, filled in with a gravel pad as though it never existed. They go on to state that this action will require WAWA permits, and this is true. We have seen their WAWA permits for geotechnical investigations. We also know that they violated those permits. If the consulting company on behalf of RDC is already charged with the violations within the planning phases, how can the community trust that any of the mitigations, setbacks, or permits put forth will be abided by? The answer is we cannot and we do not. There is no plan to avoid these wetlands, and therefore a 2-to-1 compensation plan must be put in place, costing taxpayers $3.5 million. It makes me just about sick that you want me to pay for the compensation of a wetland that I am fighting tooth and nail to save. We understand that the protection of wetlands is the utmost importance for ecological, economical, and social reasons. Zoning this land for heavy industrial development goes directly against Statement of Public Interest Regulation, Coastal Areas Protection Policy of New Brunswick, New Brunswick Wetland Conservation Policy, the North American Wetland Conservation Council, the Federal Policy on Wetland Conservation, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Nature Trust, the Federal Water Policy, the Conservation Council, ACAP, and countless other groups, acts, and policies that fight for wetland protection. The wetland serves as a habitat for countless species, many whose possible presence was not sufficiently assessed in the rushed EIA. This was recognized by lay people in the community, but also by TRC. The proposed backfilling of such a large wetland is concerning enough. However, even more concerning is the fate of the hydrologically connected salt marsh titled a provincially significant wetland. A coastal areas protection policy for New Brunswick notes that, quote, there is a connection between the environmental conditions along New Brunswick's coastlines and the activities which occur farther inland, end quote. These policies recognize that there is a connection, but Dillon Consulting has not included these areas in their assessment and state that they will be unaffected. The New Brunswick Wetlands Conservation Policy states, quote, "Government will not support proposed activities in a PSW within 30 meters of the perimeter of a PSW or any activity that poses substantial risk to a PSW," end quote. The exception to this is wetland rehabilitation and activities deemed necessary to public function. Heavy industry development is neither and would certainly pose a risk. So I ask, why is the rezoning of this land even up for discussion? The city may come back and say that there is no intention to develop the PSW, but then why include it in this amendment? This proves that this is a land grab, a seize now and figure it out later approach, not dissimilar to the massive land grab and expropriation that occurred in the 70s. At the time, Public Works Minister J. Stewart Brooks was quoted as saying, if some agreement could not be reached with the prospective industries within a reasonable time, the expropriation order would be rescinded. I would think over 50 years would be more than a reasonable amount of time, yet here we are facing another swath of land being torn away and mismanaged. The current municipal plan shows that much thought was put into marking the boundaries of industrial development areas. Wetlands and watercourses were mostly avoided, green spaces and buffers provided. The plan states a preservation of green and rural spaces and protection of drinking water, but this amendment directly opposes those goals. On top of all the negative impacts the development would have on environment, the impact of rezoning to heavy industrial would greatly affect residents' quality of life. According to the St. John City bylaw, heavy industrial is defined as a zone that, quotes, accommodates large-scale heavy industrial uses with outdoor storage and activities where the nuisance or risk factors are expected to extend beyond the boundaries of the lot. It also states that, quote, this zone is intended for lands situated within the interior of larger industrial areas or appropriate rural areas where separation can be provided to ensure public safety, end quote. It is right in the definition, nuisance or risk factors will extend to those living nearby, and that they should be placed in rural areas. Laurenville is a residential area. I invite you to come and take a drive through our village to see the pride we take in our homes and our quiet way of life. How is heavy industry a mere 150 meters behind our homes adequate separation? A treed buffer is stated to be extended to 300 meters if the use is deemed volatile. But yet the plan is to clear cut and create pad-ready sites. How will this additional 150 meters be reestablished once the wood has already been cut? Safety concerns are numerous, including the fact that Laurenville is a peninsula and any large fire or explosion, such as those witnessed recently at AIM, would leave us with no way out. The closest fire department is 9 kilometers away. The AIM fires in 2023, preceded by 181 explosions and 22 fires over the years, proved to St. Johners that the city is completely incapable of protecting its residents in these types of situations. The task force that investigated this stated that heavy industrial location not far from people's homes was, quote, entirely inappropriate given its now known hazards and risks. Heavy industry and houses don't mix. Some may look at Laurenville now and think, well, you do go past an industrial park to get there, so why choose to live there? Those people do not understand our demographic, our history, and the ties that bind us together and to this place. Laurenville has a rich history. Residents work together to help each other in times of need. Families that live here today have been here for many generations. Kids grow up and move into houses close to their parents and grandparents. As far as I can tell, and speaking from personal experience, there are 2 reasons for that. One is the deep connection to the people, and the second is the beauty of the area itself. The coastline is second to none. In the past,
Sorry, this is your 2-minute warning.
In the past decade, we have worked hard as a community to decrease the amount of illegal dumping that has historically occurred in our village. These efforts have been rewarded by an increase in visitors from all over the province and country that come to visit Black Beach, the surrounding 20 kilometers of volunteer-maintained hiking trails. Visitors describe our village as more beautiful than the Funday Parkway and only 15 minutes from the city center. We have welcomed these visitors as they recognize the treasure that this area is and are respectful and proactive in wanting to protect it. It makes me wonder why our own members of government seem to be blind to the same asset that we possess within city limits. I have many concerns regarding the EIA. It was rushed and is not thorough. It does not encompass the possible negative effects bordering residential areas and wetlands. In response to questions and fears we have regarding the air and water pollution, we received the answer, it's just a pad. Yet RDC and the city are pushing the possible positives of economic growth and jobs of industry. And to that, I would like to respond, but it's just a pad. If our fears of the possible negatives are deemed invalid, then so too are your growth fantasies. We have watched failure after failure leave our village scarred, from expropriation to the Spruce Lake Barge Terminal. Show us the plan. Show us the jobs for St. Johners that would not require worker accommodations. Show us the kind of green energy that you are attracting, and maybe then a discussion can be had about the real pros and cons. Until then, there are many vacant, undeveloped, and mismanaged lots available in the current Spruce Lake Industrial Park and within the municipal plan development area. I love my beautiful ocean side community. I love all these people behind me, literally and figuratively. I hope to live in Lorneville my whole life and watch my fruit trees and my children grow. Nowhere in my dreams is there heavy industry. There's no heavy industry in Paradise, and we from Lorneville know that Paradise and Pizarrenco are the same place.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Do we have any questions for the speaker? No. Thank you very much. If anyone else would like to speak, please approach the podium. If you could please state your name and civic address for the record, please. And a reminder that you do have 10 minutes.
Hello and good evening. My name is Vince Hedgett. I live at 295 Point Road. I guess I'm what you'd call a Lorneville lifer. As a youth, I lived at Coulson Cove until expropriation. And over the last few months, I've generated written three letters to describe how industry has impacted our lives and to share some insights as to what Lorneville means to the people who live there. So back in the 70s, this expropriation affected a large parcel of real estate and uprooted a lot of families. This was a huge land grab, and only a small portion of the land was ever used to construct the thermal generating station at Coulson Cove. There's a lot of similarities as to what happened back then and what is happening right now, and I'll get to that in a moment. In the 80s, the landfill site, an environmental disaster. If there was an EIA, it certainly didn't address the environmental impact. Our brooks and streams became grossly contaminated, killing all marine life, and the seagulls would feast at the dump, then bathe in our city's drinking water at Spruce Lake during the evening. And then the 90s. In December of 93, the Fundy Solid Waste Action Team was formed. They called them the Fundy SWAT. And an EIA was completed by a consultant, at that time, consultant firm Neil and Gunter, on behalf of Fundy SWAT. It came down to two sites, Crane Mountain and Paddy Hill being the Lorneville site. This was our opportunity to have this operation shut down, and we protested. The following is a paragraph taken from the summary prepared by the Department of Environment. I have a copy of that here. It was a report that was prepared by the Department of Environment for the Fundy Regional Sanitary Landfill. And I just wanted to read this piece. The EIA report states that despite an extensive public consultation process, residents and community neighbors neighboring both sites, particularly Martin and Lorneville, have a prevailing negative attitude toward the proposal. The report states initial attitudes of Lorneville residents were understandable because they have seen much of the land around them expropriated for industrial development, and there have been numerous environmental problems resulting from the landfill site at Spruce Lake. And in the 90s, Crane Mountain was named as Fundy Regional Sanitary Landfill, and the people of Lorneville could breathe a sigh of relief. And my second letter that I wish to talk about there was on EIA process. The EIA process has failed us in the past, and moving on to present day, things don't feel much different. Back in May or June of this year, we discovered that land clearing activities were taking place only 30 meters from the backyard of Lorneville residential properties near the beginning of Lorneville. It was only through our own investigation that we discovered what was about to happen. The trees and vegetation that were being cleared played an important role in holding back heavy rains. It was not that long ago that the roadway at Millstream flooded and became impassable by traffic. I there was a slide that I was hoping to see there would show you that. The trees and vegetation that separated the residential area from heavy industry also play another significant role. During the spring season, when temperatures start to warm and the snow starts to melt, the trees provide a natural canopy to slow the melting process, thus reducing the probability of flooding. If the area is left wide open, let's say a pad, the thaw will occur very quickly, thus increasing the possibility of flooding not only the Lorneville roadway, but also people's homes. Much consideration must be given before cutting any more trees. Once they're gone, they're gone. The first communication the people of Lorneville received from the proponent, Dillon Consultant, was white unmarked envelopes, and that's one right there. That's what we got as for information. Mine's in recycle bin, and when this one was handed to me, I just went from the mailbox to the recycle bin. The next communication presented by Dillon Consultant was one-day open house held at the Lorneville Community Center on July the 17th. We were told that any feedback on the EIA would be appreciated by August the 5th. We summarized our concerns and questions and handed them to Dillon Consulting that evening before they left. It was a couple of months, 2 to 3 months before we heard back. It would appear that this EIA is being rushed. We have asked lots of questions, attended meetings. However, no one seems to know who we are preparing this pad for, including the mayor and council. We've asked them. This whole thing reminds me of a famous, I better not read that one. The people of Lorneville are not opposed to the idea of being pad ready. However, there needs to be a reasonable buffer between residential and heavy industry. This concern is already addressed in the city's municipal plan under Section 3 entitled Land Use. The following is a paragraph taken from Section 3.5.2 entitled Employment Area Policy LU-77 that addresses heavy industry areas. You're probably familiar with it, but I wanted to read this paragraph. Where there are heavy industry land uses which emit pollution or present possible safety risks, Common Council considers the use of the best practice guideline of 1.5 kilometers buffer. Common Council should consider not increasing the density of existing incompatibility land uses adjacent to existing heavy industry facilities when they are proposed. This will ensure the future intensification of incompatible land use does not occur around these facilities. And I did a lot of reading in this document. This is well prepared. This was the one that Shane referred to as the municipal plan, and there's 277 pages in this, and it was a team, I think, of 13 that worked on that, and it's a lot of good work. And it was a plan that's supposed to serve us for the next 25 years, and we're only, I think, 13 years since that was introduced. Also, a large portion of this area the city is looking to rezone is considered wetland, approximately 53.5 hectares or 132 acres. The Department of Environment did an on-site investigation and found that the proponent, Dillon Consultant, and consulting contracted companies didn't follow the conditions in the WAWA permit as they should have, and have been instructed to do remedial work to the site to restore the damaged wetlands to the previous conditions. Next, I'd like to talk about this plan that was created. The plan describes in detail what the future development of our rural industry areas will look like along King William Road in Spruce Lake Industrial Park, and it references a Schedule B. I have a copy of that here, I believe. And it's nothing more than a map, the Schedule B, but it describes what our area should look like in the future, what our plan is for heavy industry and residential industry. And none of this includes the parcel of land that we're talking about today. The proposed, in the document provided by PAC and PAC.
Sorry,
by
this is
Dillon
your
Consultant.
2-minute warning.
Okay. In the document provided by PAC, to PAC by Dillon Consulting on behalf of the City of St. John, it states that the proposed industrial park expansion satisfies policy LU-4 as there is an identified need for land for future industrial development. But here's what policy LU-4 of the municipal plan says. Council shall not consider changing the designation of land on the future land use map, Schedule B, through a municipal plan amended unless the proposal, and they gave 2 choices down there. And I suppose they chose B, which is necessary by virtue of a lack of supply of quality land already designated in the municipal plan to accommodate the development. My question is, who are we accommodating? And until we know, I fail to see the need for this expansion and all the clear cutting. Once again, when those trees are gone, they're gone. We, the people of Lorneville, are not opposed to the city's idea of being pad ready. However, the buffer of 150 meters is not a sufficient distance to separate residents and heavy industry. Plus, the loss of trees and vegetation will be detrimental to the property along the road, Lorneville Road, and the causeway at Mill Stream. I strongly suggest we stick to the municipal plan as it's been prepared, and the city's application be denied. If I have time, I have one other letter I would read.
I'm sorry, you've got
Am I out?
exactly 8 seconds left. So. Hi. We do appreciate your comments. Oh, absolutely. Mr. Pappas, for the speaker.
You mentioned the buffer, 150 meters not being enough. What is enough?
1.5 kilometers. Or stick with the plan that you have. This plan here does not cut into that slice of land, and I believe there's a lot of designated heavy industry land there already that they could be using. And when you don't know what they want the land for, I don't know, or what they're bringing in, or who they're preparing this land for, I don't know why it's a land grab. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of similarities to what's happening right now and what happened back in the 70s. That was a land grab. They just scooped up a bunch of land, and the only thing they built was the thermal generating station. This looks like something done in haste, and the environmental impact is something else that's being pushed through in haste. And that area, that's the picture that I wanted there when we were talking about holding back the water. That's what happened to the roadway. And I did see some notes in here, and I think Dylan said that they could fix that in the future for runoff. They were going to, I think, elevate the road, put bigger drainage out. But that only fixed one of the problem. You look at that field, it's not raining there, so where's all the water coming from? And then along both sides of the road where it's ditched, it was coming out of people's driveways, following the ditch down and eroding the road itself. So if you elevated the road and put better drainage underneath it, you might fix that problem. But the water, as it comes through the canopy of trees in behind the homes along the Lorneville roadway, it still comes right out the driveway and down the ditches. So that's not a complete fix. I really dread the day that I see people in there clearing that land. We need that buffer. And I don't know the distance, and the question was asked, what is the buffer? And I think if we could live with the plan that was produced in 2011, 2012, and use the heavy industry that's already designated, then that would be fine with the people of Lorneville. Like I said again, we're not opposed to it. We just don't want it in our backyard. It's too close. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Pappas. Do we have any other questions for the speaker from the committee? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. Just a reminder, please state your name and civic address for the record.
My name's Donna Alexander. I live on the Lornville Road.
Thank you. And just a reminder, you do have 10 minutes.
I've going to try to get through this. I haven't done this since the early 90s when the residents and I fought against the Lornville dump successfully. So this is not our first time participating in this process. So now what's proposed for our community? Heavy industrial zoning next to our property lines. My question is, how did this proposal get through this process this far, or even become part of a decision or a discussion? Who introduced this, maybe in closed session or with corporations? Did not one of our elected officials stand up and say this goes against our city's land use plan, Plan St. John? This has already been brought up a couple times, so I won't quote everything I have. It was a 2-year process to make it, and good till 2035, apparently. Well, now a plan that took 2 years to develop is now listed here as proposed policies to be amended in a short amount of time, maybe weeks, to fit the city's proposal of the Spruce Lake Industrial Park expansion. There are a lot of changes going on here, wanting to be approved all at once. EIA, municipal plan policy amendments, municipal plan amending bylaw, zoning bylaw amending bylaw. It's an extensive amount of information for even you, PAC. It's confusing for the public and it's rushed. So here we are with this proposal on the table, and the residents who should be enjoying their, quote, peaceful, spacious, green, slower pace of life, end quote, from city's website describing Lornville. Instead, we are forced to spend months researching, compiling, meeting, writing letters, and presenting to educate our representatives and their hired consulting firm on their own policies, laws, EIA errors, EIA omissions, and environmental violations. This is not how I want to spend my time. Receive a letter in the mail one day, and your whole peaceful way of life is turned into a nightmare. Let's talk about industrial parks. Industrial parks were established to avoid land use conflicts and to separate industry from residential communities, which was probably the initial plan for Spruce Lake Industrial Park for isolated industrial use. But now with the proposal to push or extend this boundary of heavy industrial adjacent to a community is not isolating industry and creates a huge land use conflict and with immediate and irreversible effects. And I'm talking about the devaluation of our properties. Somebody had already touched on that. From a study of the University of Calgary addressing problematic residential industrial district interfaces, quote, zoning and development control was invented to ensure that certain types of land uses were separated from one another. It has become common practice to separate home from industry, end quote. From the same report, Saskatoon's policy on heavy industrial, quote, heavy industrial areas should not normally be situated adjacent to residential or business park land designations. Heavy industrial areas should generally be well removed from residential areas and concentrated in a minimal number of separate locations, end quote. The Strathcona County, Alberta plan follows the risk-based land use planning guide, and it's by the MIACC, Major Industrial Accidents Council of Canada, which you're probably all aware of. Page 36, the Strathcona County Municipal Plan, and it explains industrial uses that have negative effects that extend beyond the boundary of the lot shall have a minimum distance of 3 kilometers from existing and future residential sites. The risk-based land use planning guide also, quote, on page 31, public acceptance and confidence can only be achieved through public involvement, in which risk assessment is just one of the ways the community can assess the overall impact of the project, end quote. Quote, it is particularly important that adequate measures are taken to ensure public involvement in the early stages of the decision-making process. Where possible, a public discussion of guidelines for acceptable levels of risk should take place prior to any discussion of modifications to land use plans or controls or approval of specific projects. Associated with the question of public involvement is that of the public's right to know, that is, the right to have sufficient information concerning projects which have impacts on safety, health, and the environment, end quote. Has there been a risk assessment done on the project? We don't even know the industry that is proposed. How can we approve or amend a zoning change without a risk assessment for the adjacent community? The public have the right to know. What are our risks? The public involvement was next to non-existent, as are the details of any specific projects. So I have brought attention to a couple of municipality plans and risk guidelines. And then there's the City of St. John plan, which somebody had already stated, so I won't quote, incompatible land use, and the 1.5 kilometer, that's in the policy LU 77. Mr. Edgett already talked about that. So why not follow the policy? Because we don't have any other location? Does this override all the opposing facts? But we did an EIA on that. First, the EIA is on the proposed pad site land only. It is not the total heavy industrial rezoning area. According to the expert panel on impact assessment on the Government of Canada's website, it states, quote, in order to ensure confidence in the new assessment process, we conclude that it must be entirely based on evidence that is and seem to be unbiased, accurate, accessible, and complete, end quote. The EIA was biased, inaccurate, and incomplete. It's a good thing it was accessible. The report was accessible, but the contacts were not. I couldn't get a reply or any answer to any of my questions. So
Sorry, this is your
answers
2-minute warning.
were not accessible. I'll talk a little bit about the bias of it. The consulting firm can't be unbiased. It's paid by the proponent. It stands to get more business opportunities in the future if this amendment passes. Hence, Dillon closes the recent letter to the City of St. John, quote, we appreciate you allowing Dillon to support this application and look forward to collaborating in the future, end quote. An October report and there's approval of the application is recommended. Biased. It's a conflict of interest. It wasn't, the report, EIA stated the Lornville residents embrace the evolution and growth of the industrial park. There was no survey of that, and I don't know any one resident that embraces it. Jobs would be created at an unprecedented scale. That's speculation. Land use property values won't be affected. Health and safety won't be affected. The EIA, so it wasn't accurate. There was the mistake of the 1,590 hectares that should have been acres. It said the report states it was the select site was chosen because it was located within an active industrial park. It's not within, it's a proposed expansion. It wasn't complete, and it left out a lot of studies. The butterfly sweeps, the nesting, there's wood turtles, there's many things that were left out. So it's unbiased, it was inaccurate and incomplete, and doesn't cover the total land identified in the amendment. How is this a reliable assessment? In closing, I stand here with my neighbors united to protect our community's best interest and preserve our environment. I would guarantee if any other community or area in the city was faced with heavy industrial zoning on their property lines, there would be just as much opposition as our community has shown. Heavy industry should be 3 kilometers away from any residential property line. I speak today to oppose this zoning amendment for my children and my grandchildren who are 5th and 6th generation Lornville residents, who I think have the right to grow and live in a safe and healthy environment. Last quote from the constitutionalstudies.ca. The Supreme Court has called environmental protection a fundamental value in Canadian society. The Supreme Court has also expressed that our common future, that of every Canadian community, depends on a healthy environment. End quote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the speaker from the committee this time? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You'll save me from having to count. If you could please state your name and civic address for the record. And again, please remember you have 10 minutes. But
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sherry Caldwell McCaver, and I live at 2625 Bourneville Road. I'm speaking to you this evening so as to voice my concerns related to the redesignation and rezoning of 421 hectares of natural and wetland area adjacent to the community of Lornville. This action is but the first step to the destruction of precious natural vegetation and wetland in order to make for proposed heavy industry in my community. I myself have been a resident of Lornville for 30 years, more than half of my life, and live there with my husband, who is a 7th generation McCaver. His ancestor, Hugh McCaver, immigrated from Ireland in the early 1800s with the hope of finding a better life, and he settled in our community, and for that we're very thankful. The McCavers are about one of many families who have inhabited the community for centuries and have been delighted in the fact that newer families are discovering the beauty and quiet of this unique village. The concerns I want to highlight this evening relate to some of the negative socioeconomic impacts implied with this redesignation rezoning proposal. Now, the fact that there was an EIA conducted for this proposal, but a residential health equity impact assessment was not done is of great concern. There has been no analysis to gain a clear understanding of what this redesignation and future plan of putting heavy industry into the area is going to do to residents' physical and their mental well-being. So for reference, an HEIA is a tool to help identify unintended potential health impacts of a policy, program, or initiative on vulnerable or marginalized populations. And I dare say, Lornville has been a marginalized population within the limits of the city of St. John since its amalgamation almost 60 years ago. It's a known fact that populations residing within the close proximity of heavy industry have a higher occurrence of health issues, including heart disease, respiratory issues, cancers, mental illnesses. And it's also been proven that those living close to those types of industries experience lower life expectancies than populations who do not have these industries like this in their neighborhoods and in their backyards. The health inequities associated with expanding and introducing heavy industry to our community is going to impact our quality of life. It's going to decrease our physical health, and it's going to increase psychological conditions and issues. And bear in mind that this in turn is going to put an even bigger strain on our already floundering provincial healthcare system. The fact that the city wants to implement these amendments with an end plan of pushing offensive and volatile industry into our community is a significant social injustice to the residents of Lornville. What other city would think to build a heavy volatile industry around an existing community? And who would want to have potentially cancer-causing industries 150 meters from their back property line? In other provinces, HEIAs are legislated to be included in any project or policy change so as to investigate the potential health impacts to residents. Why wasn't this not done for the Laurenville residents? This is yet another example of the marginalization experienced by tax-paying citizens of this community. Another concern that I have with the rushed push with this redesignation and rezoning to the area in preparation for unconfirmed, who knows what's coming in there, offensive and volatile industry, which it was touched on, it's just the impact to our quality of life. Now, our mayor has stated that she was not overly familiar with the community of Laurenville and the beauty it offers, yet she and other seated councilors who may or may not be familiar with the area and the hidden gems that we have are about to pass life-changing sentences on these residents. It's going to impact, like I said, our quality of life, our mental and physical health, and our general well-being. It's a huge concern for every single person sitting in here and every person that couldn't make it in here tonight. The level of stress and mental duress that I myself, excuse me, I may get a little emotional, have been enduring since receiving the unmarked white envelopes from Dillon Consulting in July, coupled with the lack of transparency from council and this province in regards to the potential change has been overwhelming. I know others in the community have the same feeling. The stress this entire process has inflicted on my health, and I'm speaking for myself right now, with the thought of the potential noise levels, health concerns, traffic safety, it's staggering. And that's just the first phase, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, the thought of air, light, and environmental pollution that will inevitably result from heavy industry being placed in this rezoned area is heartbreaking, and it has made me lose sleep for weeks on end right now. The feeling of helplessness at times is insurmountable. Some, you've heard this already, but some may say, but it's just a pad. Oh, I'm sorry. This is much more than just a pad. We think we touched base on the amount of heavy industry traffic. Has that been? Okay, I'll let you get away with that one. That's fine. I do have a couple more points here, and I'm well under my 10 minutes. That's good. Unfortunately, I do have to make mention here of the fact that there is also an increased level of distrust within the community for council actions with the proposed changes to the city plan and zoning bylaws. The feeling that the city of St. John continues to marginalize this community and the level of suspicion and distrust for council, it certainly did not start with sitting council, and I need that to be understood, please. But it has been long-standing. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been going on for decades. We are constantly feeling marginalized, segregated, not treated as true, full citizens of this city. In one breath, we heard when these plans were revealed in the summer that, well, if some vegetation has to be lost in the name of progress, so be it. And then when we attended city council in, I believe it was in August, because this was being sent to you for the amendment, we were told in that meeting that what our community endured in the past with previous councils is not how this will be handled by the current seated council, and that previous wrongs will not be repeated. I'm sorry, but this community has every right to be on guard when it comes to political promises, be it municipal or provincial. And I, for one, I'm not against progress for the growth of this city. I do, however, have strong reservations and concerns with the rushed method the province and the city is taking in regards to the life-altering change. So I'm going to sum up in under 10 minutes. As I mentioned earlier, I am a resident of Laurenville. I've been there for 30 years. When I moved to this area, it was literally the first time in my life that I felt like I had a home. I was and I remain in awe of being a part of a community full of people who genuinely care about their neighbors and the beauty that surrounds the place that they call home. It's a welcoming community. It's rich in history and pride for what they and those who came before them have created. So I'm saying to you right now, to put forth a recommendation to pass amendments permitting the eradication of this natural wetland and vegetation 150 meters from neighboring residential properties so as to place large pads there in the hopes of, if we build it, they will come. This is, to say at the very least, extremely short-sighted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any questions for the speaker from the committee? We have one, Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks for your presentation. And probably something I should have been asking all the way along, but it just came to my mind during your presentation. Like, we know that Laurinville, the entrance to Laurinville is through a current industrial park, and then you get to your community. So you do have neighbors that are industrial in nature now. Mm-hmm. And being that you're the newcomer, from what I see, to Laurinville, only being there 30 years, how's the relationship with the current occupants of the industrial park now? Like, how is that relationship in Laurinville with what is there now?
If you're asking from my perspective,
that's all I can ask.
So, okay, then I am going to go back to a little piece that I had omitted at the moment. It's just, my part that I was saying was that I have strong concerns over the amount of heavy industry traffic that's going to be added to the King William Road during this phase and the subsequent ones with the redesignation and rezoning. So, and the EIA report that Dylan had put forth had stated that we as residents would not be impacted by that increase in the industrial traffic because the Laurinville Road wasn't going to be used during the grubbing, et cetera, et cetera. However, I strongly disagree with it because, as you said, there's only one way in and out of Laurinville, and you have to go on to King William Road. Right now, there is a decent amount of industrial traffic for whatever reason on King William Road. So it is a little sketchy at times. Adding even more heavy equipment and traffic into that area, it's a great concern to me because, as I said, we only have one way in and out. If anything happens, Laurinville is cut off from the rest of the city. In relation to the, I'm trying to think of some of the industries are there, like Saputo and all those other ones. There doesn't seem, in my opinion, I don't have an issue with those. And I am not against growth in the area. What I am against is the possibility of growth by decimating 421 hectares of land and uprooting centuries of a way of life for people. So, my opinion.
So if I'm hearing correctly, increase in industrial traffic is a concern. The industrial traffic now is a pain.
Yeah, but
you live with it. The increase is a concern.
There's going to be huge issues with dangers with people driving, cycling. Well, I try and do like distances walking and running in that area. I'm terrified to go out there now because even with the changes that have been happening with a lot of the stuff that's been happening behind us.
No, I'm processing and capturing that. What I'm working on is, and I can certainly understand the unknown, heavy industry, not knowing what possibly might go there. But there's industry there now, not in this area, but in the general. I'm just trying to get in my mind, like, is that the industry and the kind of the level and kind of industry that's there now, apart from the traffic, does that disturb the neighborhood? Is it kind of part of the ecosystem?
In my opinion, where it's located at the moment, and please don't hurt me, I don't find that it's impacting the area now. Mind you, the community was there before the industrial park, right? Things have been moving in, but for now, it's not impacting my ability to enjoy my property in the way that I have a right to do so.
Fair.
These
Yeah.
changes are going to decimate our quality of life.
Yeah, fair. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sullivan. I'm sorry, we're not taking comments from the floor, but if you wish to speak at the podium, you can. And again, I would ask you to please state your name and civic address.
My name is Ross McKenzie. I live on 19 McGuire Drive in Lorneville. I live in a house that was taken on a flatbed truck from Colson Cove when the government made a decision to take over people's residential properties with no intent, well, an intended reason, but amounted in fruition to nothing. One man was killed while that transition was happening, lost his life for no good reason. To answer your question, Mr. Sullivan, right now the industrial park has been accommodated by the community. In answer to your question, residences are not located. I would say the closest resident I can think of, other than the community store, would be at least 400, 500 meters away. And that's with designated light or whatever it's designated as now. It's not heavy industrial. The concerns or the unknown, the X factor that seems to be poo-pooed or being put down by a lot of people and a lot of the consultants. I've been to all the meetings. I don't find are being addressed in a proper manner. When you're talking heavy industrial, that's where the X factor comes in. That's where the question mark comes in. When you talk about cancerous agents, when you talk about ways that impact on human lives, on children's lives, we don't even have a sidewalk in Lorneville. We may live in Lorneville, but we're citizens of St. John. We pay that same tax base. And Ms. McShane, I have to compliment you on your questions and your comments because they were very insightful. And yes, tax base is important to any city. If an industrial or an unknown industrial, if we just have pads sitting around and there's no occupants in those pads, what good's the tax base for that industry? Okay, you're going to get a small pittance, a small percentage of a tax base. Okay, I know people in this room that I'm looking at right now that probably pay a bigger tax rate than a lot of companies would, or a lot of the industries do in the industrial park presently. The problem that I have personally with heavy industrial, and I asked it at every meeting I've been at thus far, is what's the immediacy? What's the push? What's the push to have this put in place without a proper explanation? When we talk about transparency, it seems to be just a word, okay? We are citizens of St. John. We live in Lorneville, but we're citizens of St. John. And yes, we care about our families. The buffer zone that's being talked about is absolutely ludicrous. If anybody's driven from Truro towards Antigonish in Nova Scotia, you'll see what a buffer zone does. They have a buffer zone of 100 meters. And the first large windstorm that came down knocked down every tree. You can still drive past there and you'll see them. They're all like that. Okay? The first proposed buffer zone of 30 meters, where did that come from? Anybody who does an environmental assessment should have their heads read, because anybody who would agree to a 30-meter zone is really not living in reality. You talk about environmental impact and assessments. If you don't have a large buffer zone there, not only to accommodate the wildlife, which is very prevalent in Lorneville, with the wetlands, But if you don't have a larger buffer zone, all that's going to happen is that you're going to be calling Ergen in there to cut that dead wood so you can increase the buffer zone later, which to me is just, it's like an appeasement on the short term for the residents of Laurinville. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but Mr. Sullivan brought up a good point, and I don't think it was clarified enough by the fact that the industry that's there now, we've learned to live with. The industry that's there now, to us, is not visibly a pollutant. It's not affecting us. When you talk heavy industrial, you're changing the whole semantics of the whole project. All right? Heavy industrial can mean pollution in the ground, pollution in the air, kills wildlife, kills humans. Okay, let's talk about cell phones or radiation towers that they're still doing studies on today that are putting kids in the hospital with cancer. That's a fact. Okay? The X factor we don't know about is heavy industrial. What is the meaning of heavy industrial? I've heard 3 people here tonight ask for examples of heavy industrial. We didn't get concrete examples of heavy industrial that I could see. Okay? So that's the reason that I couldn't sit in my seat. I appreciate your time. I hope I answered your question on my part. And I hope you people all take into consideration how personal and how important this is to the residents of Laurinville who pay the same tax base as somebody living on King Street in St. John. I have my own well, my own septic. Okay, I have all that stuff. What the city provides me is an ambulance to take me to the hospital if it can get through with all the proposed traffic increases that may be coming down the pipe. Okay, I get my road plowed, not the sidewalk. If the city was prepared to install a sidewalk, I would. We have not much time. No? No. I would personally take care of it myself. Okay? We have a stake in the community. I'm sorry for taking up your time, but I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your comments. Do we have anyone else that wishes to speak on this topic? Yes. Great. So I ask you to state your name and civic address for the record, and a reminder, you do have 10 minutes.
Yep. Good evening. My name is Sarah Betts, and I am the 6th generation of Laurinville resident, raising the 7th generation. Please bear with me as I read this. I am not a public speaker, and I'd much rather be sitting hidden behind me in the crowd. But as I tell my little girls, you have to stand up for yourself and you have to fight for what you believe in. So here I am, not only for myself, but for my 2 sweet little girls who are snuggled up in our cozy home on the Laurinville Road. I'm going to skip the next part because everyone talked about every generation has to fight for Laurinville. My grandparents, my parents, and now me. So I'm going to talk about my property. I can't help but think about how much my property will be less desirable with heavy industry in the backyard, or even the zoning for heavy industry in the backyard. The same property that my husband and I put so much love, time, and money into to make our home, the same property that I'm raising 2 sweet little girls on, the same property that I cried tears of happiness when I bought it. I also can't imagine the same piece of property being bright at night from the lights of buildings in behind, stopping us from chasing fireflies in the summer, or being loud from the construction of these said pads, or later buildings taking away from any sort of peace and quiet I have on my deck. I also want to just clarify 150 meters. My 10-year-old daughter ran 100 meters when she was in grade 3, barely out of breath. They also said you can add, we'll add an extra 150 for volatile compound or whatever. Again, 400 meters is a race they run in elementary school. How can you put volatile compounds or volcanic clouds or toxic clouds in the same sentence as people's homes and their children. It just does not make sense. It's hard to believe that when I sit and really think about everything, 2 words come to mind. One being scared, because the whole idea of this honestly scares me to death. And the other word is sneaky. Sneaky because I find it very hard to believe that unmarked letters we received in the mail earlier this summer from Dillon Consulting were a clerical mistake. I believe that having them delivered to our mailboxes in a plain white envelope was very intentional, hoping that residents would not open them and toss them in recycling. I believe the entire EIA was rushed and had multiple mistakes because, again, they were hoping that residents would not take the time to read it. But we did. Now those 2 words are ending up in the same sentence. I am scared to believe anything that we are told because of the sneaky incidents that have already happened. In closing, I would really appreciate if you took the residents' concerns into consideration when making this decision. This is not just a piece of land to us. This is our home and our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Do we have any questions for the speaker? No. No. Hi. Oh, sorry, I've got your mic off. Just a reminder, please state your name and civic address for the record, and you do have 10.
It's Adam Wilkins, and I live at 24 McGuire Drive in Laurinville. And obviously, I'm a Laurinville resident. For a proposed project of this magnitude, which is absolutely massive, I might add, I would expect there to be a much higher level of forethought, time, effort, collaboration, communication, and attention to detail. The fact that every step of the way has been hindered by blunders speaks to the core issues that have plagued the proposed project from the start and furthered concern from mistrust from the community of Laurinville. If someone with RDC or the city or even Dillon had sat back for more than a minute to reflect on the bigger picture, they may have seen an opportunity to be more transparent, more engaging, more collaborative, and much less deceptive that likely would have led to a potentially better response from the community that we likely would have accepted easily. Instead, significant hubris led to a situation that I don't think can be remedied without the governmental side taking time to actually see the forest for the trees. As a community, we've had to become de facto biologists, environmentalists, activists, investigative journalists. We've had to hike through the woods for hours on end, meet with politicians, communication experts, lobbyists, lawyers, actual biologists, environmentalists, activists, and reporters. We've had to file rights of information, have countless meetings, put up signs on mailbox, and send thousands of emails and letters, all in the effort to get more information and do what we feel is right. If these are the lengths a community must go to address something of this magnitude, what does it say about the process? How is the process fair? How can the government agencies and arms that are supposed to represent the checks and balances for health and safety also be under the same provincial government umbrella that is proposing the project? Laurinville has had to pay the price for government's mismanaged land, large-scale developments, industrial parks, and lack of cohesive forethought. Now we're again facing the same circumstances. Different year, same situation, same families, same land, and the same fight. The parameters have changed, the appearance of safety nets have improved, but they're just window dressing. That's all it is. An understaffed Department of Environment that oversees the EIA process, which, as one of our Right to Information releases showed, guided Dillon on how to word the EIA to ensure it goes through so that the proposed project can move forward on behalf of the same province that is both responsible for initiating the project and overseeing the aforementioned Department of Environment. Seems like the perfect shell game to ensure that we will lose. Laurinville exists in a rural residential area of St. John and is designated and promoted as such. We rely on our own wells and septic, and we lack sidewalks. We still pay the exact amount of taxes as the rest of St. John. We likely have one of the highest taxes to lack of services ratio in Canada, something that shouldn't be a point of pride. Laurinville has been promised lots over the years to partially account for these industrial projects and injustices, yet none of them really have come to fruition. Everything good in Laurinville, the community has had to fight for and do for themselves. We have world-class hiking trails, a thriving ATV club, and a strong sense of community because we have people that actually care about this place. We have families that endured numerous hardships that taught their kids to stand up for what is right and give back to their community. I look at the AIM debacle and see something that had an EIA performed, albeit shoddy at best, but it was justified as acceptable enough to open the door to allow AIM to exist, and look how that turned out. Now the city is saying it has learned from that situation and will not allow something like that to happen again. But why then are you considering allowing heavy industry to set up shop a mere 30 meters, now 150 meters, from a residential neighborhood, of which relies on wells for drinking water? The language in the newest document says there will not be any metal recycling with a shredder permitted in the new zone. However, there's already a metal recycler with a shredder across the road at the former Simpson scrap metal location. So what's the real difference? The Birchall wind farm across the road is afforded a 300-meter buffer for basically an inert object, especially when compared to a heavy industrial park. Yet the proposed buffer for this heavy industrial park is 150 meters from the nearest residential property. If someone can explain to me how a windmill can receive a buffer of 10 times that of a refinery, I'm happy to listen. The city's own municipal plan states that a buffer of 1.5 kilometers is best practice separation between heavy industry and residential areas, which is 10 times the distance that's being recommended. That's a significant difference. At every turn of this proposed development, there are instances that just don't make logical sense, especially if you are someone that lives in, visits, or cares about the area. Given everything that has been said tonight, I can't think of a better expression than those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Why take the chance to make the same mistake over and over and over? Why put resident health and safety in jeopardy in the name of economic growth and something that we don't actually know that will be there? Why rush through a poorly conceived plan in the name of development? Why demonstrate such a lack of regard for the residents of Lornville, a community that has been going through the same repeated issues since the 1970s, beginning with expropriation? There are people sitting in this room right now that watch their childhood houses be torn down in the name of required industrial and economic growth, only to watch that same land sit vacant for 50 plus years and be denied the chance to get it back. Now, all these years later, these same people are again having the same fight against heavy industrial development and how it will negatively impact their quality of life. If provincial regulations, government agencies, city bylaws, and city councils truly exist to represent and protect the constituents, then why does it feel like we've been let down at every step? Why does it feel like we've had to do the work to protect ourselves? Why have we assumed the aforementioned de facto roles? Why is government forced us to do so much of the work? Why do government officials openly complain to us that the system is broken and only exists to put on the appearance of safety and protection, while in reality functioning to allow things to take place in the name of dollars and cents? Why do we have the right to information if we have to jump through incredible hoops just to obtain it, only for some of it to come back as redacted? Who is there to truly represent us? Because it certainly doesn't appear that to be our elected officials, nor does it appear to be the consulting company that is hired to represent both sides with the ultimate goal of pushing the project forward, the literal definition of a conflict of interest. Given everything that has been discussed this evening, and the fact that so much must be amended to the municipal plan as previously discussed, to even be able to have things move forward, we're requesting that PAC and the city reject amendments to the municipal plan and reject the zoning changes for this project as it currently stands. And we have a list of questions and concerns that we'd like answered and addressed and explored, and some recommendations, and I'll hand those out after rather than reading them to you. And I'm just in closing, I don't know if many people in the government have young kids or read them books or truly care about the environment or their constituents. But there's a rather famous children's book by Dr. Seuss. It's quite popular in our house, sadly far more apropos than I've ever wanted it to be. Published in 1971, the Lorax chronicles the plight of the environment. And the Lorax, the main character who speaks for the trees and confronts the Onceler, a business magnate who causes environmental destruction. I'll leave you with a short passage from this book. The Lorax said nothing, just gave me a glance, just gave me a very sad, sad backward glance as he lifted himself by the seat of his pants, and I'll never forget the grim look on his face when he hoisted himself and took leave of this place through a hole in the smog without leaving a trace. And all that the Lorax left here in this mess was a small pile of rocks with one word, unless, whatever that meant. Well, I guess I just couldn't guess. That was long, long ago, but each day since that day, I've sat here and worried away. Through years while my buildings have fallen apart, I've worried about it with all of my heart. But now, says the Onceler, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So catch, calls the Onceler. He lets something fall. It's a truffula seed. It's the last one of all. You're in charge of the last of the truffula seeds, and truffula trees are what everyone needs. Plant a new truffula, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from axes that hack. Then the Lorax and all his friends may come back. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have a quick question. You wouldn't happen to have a copy of the access to information request you made?
On me now?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
It's thousands of pages.
All right.
I can provide that if need be.
That may be helpful. Not in this exact moment, but
Sure.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the committee for the speaker at this time? No.
Can I hand out that document?
Pardon?
May I hand out the document that for your to note?
You can hand it to me, yes.
Okay. There's one for everyone.
Thank you very much. I believe we have time for one more speaker, two, or maybe two if people are quick.
Hello, my name is Cecil McCaver. I live on 1050 Laurenville Road. I am a 8th generation McCaver in Laurenville from Ireland. I am a board member of Explore Laurenville and the president of the Laurenville ATV Club. So, as you could say, I'm an outdoor activist and I care deeply about my community. We've covered basically every base that we could with our community behind us, but the one word I'd like the rest of us all think about tonight is transparency. We know the city has not been transparent with us before, so I can just say I had a phone call before we had this vigilante little letter from Dylan, a phone call from out of province. Where would you guys have that much land in Laurenville to host a battery plant? I said, are you sure you're talking about Laurenville? We've got Grandview Industrial Park. We've got many industrial parks. How do you know it's Laurenville? Because it's all expropriated land. Well, just to bug in your ear, within a few months, there is going to be a plan putting in a battery plant in Laurenville. It wasn't 2 weeks later that we got the mail from Dylan saying, this is the proposed site. And I said, well, here's our fight. There's been a lot, like you can see with the rushed EIA, the non-transparency, the letters delayed getting to us, and what we've dealt with before. This is why our community is like this. We've had the JTR site cleared before. We didn't have one say. The community was not against that. The fact that we're here and we could be clearing this land for where you guys wanted your designated spot, the original 2012 plan, could be getting done right now. But you put it in our backyard. I can see the test holes from my property line. So I would just like everybody to say, think about transparency, and we would just hope the city respects on what they've done to the community in the past since 1967. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any questions from the committee right now? Councillor Lowe, please.
How you doing?
Hey, Gary.
What happens, you're right, almost everything you said. What would happen if we went back again, if the city went back again, not us? Because this is going to council, I think, on the 8th, or he said the 12th. I thought it was the 8th. I could be wrong. 12th, well, it's the 12th.
The first day of lobster season.
Yeah, lobster season. You got a lobster boat too, right? What happens if the city went back with the people here and discussed the word heavy industry? Everybody mentions heavy industry. It is a pad. They are telling the truth. It is a pad. But it's to have a pad so something will come later.
Yes. We know there's definitely much more. They're pushing it so hard, this pad.
But I mean, 30 is ridiculous. 100 and a half. Should it be 200? Should it be 300? Should it be 400? I don't know. I'm a taxi driver. You're a lobster fisherman, right? Like you mean?
I can say it was 30 proposed to 150. The Galbraith asphalt plant is 1,700, and I'm extremely affected by that asphalt plant. Classic Construction just sold out to Debley, which is the second largest asphalt company in St. John, and they're going to be starting up their asphalt plant next summer.
I don't even think he's going to start it. But anyways, I
Well-
know what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, what's wrong with going back again before this goes to council? Not that I'm trying to tell you that it's going to either win or get defeated, but council will be the final decision. It's not the PAC. Council's elected by the people, including people on West Side. And somebody mentioned that earlier, right? But I'm trying to think that why wouldn't we start again and be transparent? Just like you were saying, there wasn't transparent.
That's right.
And I agree. I sat with you and down there with your grandfather, I think, and I know lots of people in Lorville. And I know what happened in 70 and 71. I know what happened with the dump, the 6-month grace period. I know that gentleman right there when he worked for the city, and I've been around for a while. But I'm trying to say, if it went to council and get passed, this is all defeated. If it went to council and it worked it out between the city and the people of Lornville.
Yes,
It'd be a
I
lot
think the
better.
city should meet with the community itself instead of going behind their back and doing this rush GIA.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Go with the original plan that they made in 2012, discuss with the community of Laurinville, have a board for Laurinville to make discussions with the community as a whole for amenities.
I brought that
And
up.
I think
earlier. I mean,
that's what they should have done in the first place, instead of me hearing about this before I got a letter, before anybody got a letter.
me having to talk to you down there at the community center.
Yeah. So if the city would have approached this and gave us the decency after knowing the history, we wouldn't even be here today.
So I'm saying, is there any chance that what I'm trying to say, what you said, the transparency part, and everybody said the same thing. Everybody mentions the word heavy industry. I'm looking for the port to expand, 2 more cranes, and some place to put the containers. the empty
Absolutely. I'm
ones.
all for growth as well. I
And
think
we
if,
need rail down there, we need water, we need electricity down there.
I think we do have a suitable spot, as they say, for the area, but not in that size. If we went to the original size and the city came to us and discussed what we're going to put in, I think that'd be the best approach.
That's what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, you know, it's not me to decide. I'm a counselor, and Gary's a counselor, and we'll be sitting on the 12th waiting to make a decision. You people are all going to be there, no doubt. But I'm saying, to me, it would be a lot better to go back again and start again and try to do it in that month period and get things done. Because there's a word here that says things for the community. Somebody mentioned sidewalks, right? I seen that community center, the what do you call it, right behind the community center, the playgrounds, I guess, right? There's lots of things that could happen in Lornville that the city could pay for and work some kind of a deal out that is not heavy industry.
No, that's 100% right. There could be a St. John City and Trust Fund. There could be amenities done, some compensation. But the way it's been attacked right now, we are have to restart this, like you said.
So I was waiting for you to come up, right? But anyway, I mean, I don't know. It's up to this committee here to recommend something, right? But I mean, it's also, there's leaders in your community. You're well organized, that's for sure. And it's what I'm trying to say is that you can come on the 12th of October. You can come back again or get off your lobster boat and come. And if they pass it, it's over. And you can fight and hire lawyers and do all kinds of things, right? But it might not work in your favor. Maybe by talking, it would work in your favor and work in the city's favor too, both sides.
Yep.
But it's up to, it's up to whatever this board makes a recommendation. I mean, all we do is make recommendations to council. Council sometimes accept it, sometimes you think we're crazy. They do all kinds of different things. But I'm more interested in the end result of what happens to all you people out there. I mean, I know Bobby Arndt, there's all kinds of people I know down there. And I've driven down there to the end, I drove around it, right? And I've driven up to Simpson's place. I know where, there's not a shredder up there. Somebody said there is a shredder. There's not a shredder. And it's city property. And the last shredder was on government property, and that's why we couldn't control it. It had nothing to do with the PAC, period. We had no control. But there's not a shredder up there. Now, is there going to be one? Probably. But that's what I say to you. And I don't know where we go. I mean, that's just me. I don't even talk to these people about it until after, right? But I hate to see it go to waste.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe, and thank you very much for your valuable input. It is now 9:15. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, if we are to have substantive debate and to be able to bring Dillon Consulting and city staff back up to ask questions, I'm going to have to close the public portion of community comments at this time, and we will adjourn for 10 minutes for another break and resume at 9:25.
But I mean, if I was to go up here, go like a 10:08, you're gonna have to just go. But they didn't hear it. Nobody said anything about that because they were trying to be in that section. But this is all private, they should be trying to buy it out. No, this is the Dexter
I don't. No fat at all? Yeah. Well, you can put beef fat if you get that, but if you put pork fat, it turns it kind of rancid after a while.
So would you put no fat in it, or would you just, you don't put fat in it? Because I was reading, a lot of guys are like, a lot of experienced guys are like, no fat, no fat, no fat. And if you had a choice, how long would you hang your animal for? 16 days would be too long. Yeah, I was gonna cut mine up on Monday. In 16 days, there's nothing wrong with that. No, that one, is there? No. Okay. All right, I'll get your bin cleaned up in 20 minutes. Deliver to you.
Well, I believe in growth, and I think but I mean, just not. Like, see them, I can see where they did the actually clear those properties right now. It's on government now. That's where they're using the lab goes to help so like shoot. You gotta have, like we get a lot of see a lot of geese. Every 9 minutes they take these. I usually get these see, I keep hearing very low horn around the house. I can hear very horn out there.
Are you fine with me sign it? Can you make me cry twice?
And since the indigenous make 1%, they pulled out. Yeah. So then they don't have to. But I mean, if it was the other side, that's so we haven't got anyone's ever happened. It is yeah, the buffer was
Hi, everyone. If I could ask everyone to please take a seat so we can resume momentarily. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I believe we're all members of the committee are seated. If we could please resume, as we do still have some items to cover. Before the break, we did close the final call for comments from the public. Committee, do we want to call the applicant back for any questions at this time? I see that's a no for the applicant. So I will close the public portion of this item. I did just hear Councillor Sullivan mention that he has a question for staff. Would you like to go ahead, Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. Forgive my lack of experience with development of industrial parks, because I don't think I've been on one. But to the point of runoff and water, when you prepare a site, cut down all the trees and build a pad and be ready. We've had this conversation around residential developments and about runoff and how it's handled. Can you tell me how it's handled and what our requirements are for industrial development?
Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Sullivan. Thank you very much for your question. Just to clarify, my name is Jeremy Clack. I am a municipal engineer with infrastructure developments, and so I look at these applications from the perspective of their impact on stormwater runoff. When we receive an application for development, that is the time that we would assess the impacts on stormwater runoff. We have the Storm Drainage Design Criteria Manual, which prescribes methods by which an engineering consultant needs to assess the existing conditions of lands that are to be developed and contemplates how the proposed development will impact runoff from those lands. And our requirements are such that adverse impacts from the development are not permitted. There can be no increase in peak stormwater runoff flow from a site following development, any more so than what currently runs off the site. Nothing else is permitted.
Okay, so it's the same as with the residential developments that we get.
That's correct.
And that's throughout the development process as well. It's not
That
just
would be at the building permit stage. So any permitting stage, that's when that comes into play.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Mr. Pappas?
To the chair, Mr. Chair, to Jeremy, so just to clarify, do you need a permit for the pad?
No.
So there'll be, what kind of retentions involved if they clean off 10-acre site, make a pad?
Sorry, let me clarify. Did you ask if there was going to be a permit for the pad?
Yeah.
Yes, there would be.
Oh, there's a permit for the pad?
No, we have not received a permit for the
No,
pad,
no, no.
but there would
But
be
if the city,
required.
if the city cleans up a site and makes it ready for a pad and strips it, there's no permit involved.
That would be subject to a stormwater management plan.
It would be?
Yes.
Okay, good, because that would be a real concern for anyone living there.
Absolutely. So we would not permit the development of a pad without contemplation for control of stormwater from the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. Do we have any other questions for city staff at this time? If not, I would encourage any discussion amongst the committee before we vote on the issue at hand. Before we pitch into discussion, since I have the open mic, I will take advantage of it as the vice chair. Most of you, I'm sure, don't know me. I haven't lived in St. John that long, only 3 years, but I've worked for the federal government of Canada for 18 years of my life. 5 of those years I spent with the Federal Department of Public Works, cleaning up in our industrial remediation branch, working on the Sydney Tar Ponds cleanup in Cape Breton. Decades and decades of pollution arsenic and mercury dumped into the water, leaking retaining ponds full of naphthalene and benzene, water courses destroyed, cancer rates through the roof, ruined property values, shellfish fisheries so utterly contaminated that mussels and lobsters couldn't even form hard shells in the area from the pollution. The federal government, I spent 5 years working on it, and the federal government spent $800 million cleaning up that one site. And for the remediation, us in the federal government, we spent 1 year doing community consultations with the people in the city, with the indigenous groups, with the province, and with basically I think we almost talked to everyone on Cape Breton Island. I racked up a lot of air miles flying back and forth between Ottawa and Cape Breton. And that was for the remediation of the site, of what the community wanted, on how they wanted us to clean up and how best we could clean it up. And I've seen numerous other contaminated sites in the federal portfolio. And it's all well and good to say, you know, an EIA has been done, we're going to mitigate the water, and then a company violates the law, dumps heavy metals into your water supply, declares bankruptcy when you give them the cleanup bill, and then the feds have to come in and do it for you. So that's my general view on the idea of building heavy industry in a wetland. But I believe Mr. Como had his
Thank you, Chair. I commend everybody here. You guys are a well-oiled machine, so to speak, for community. You came here, you had your education, you're very passionate about your community, and that's to be commended to all of you people, for sure. I think we heard a lot of stuff tonight against heavy industries and things like that. We took down all your points. I've got notes. Everybody has notes. I'm not prepared to vote with staff recommendations right now, and I'm not prepared to vote against staff recommendations. So I'm going to make another motion, and we'll see where it goes. My motion would be that city staff and the leaders here with city staff meet with the developers and the leaders of your community and work together, hopefully prior to the November 12th meeting, and get this hashed out. I think there's some good stuff here, and obviously there's some stuff that everybody's concerned about, and I think the transparency that everybody talked about, meeting in the same room, will clear that up. So my motion is to get city staff to meet with the residents and the developers and hash this out before November 12th.
Do we have a second for that motion? Seconded from Mr. Hutchinson. So we have a second. I will now call the vote. All those in
question.
With questions.
Sorry. Question from Ms. McShane.
Thank you,
Motion
Mr.
on
Chairman.
table.
Yeah, I'm not sure, so I have a couple of questions just on the motion itself. I will say that hearing some of the history of Laurinville, a barge facility that didn't happen, a barge facility that hasn't met up to what was promised, already an industrial park beside you. It's one thing for me who lives in the city of St. John and chose to live here, and everyone says, you know, you live in an industrial city. I'm like, yeah, and I chose to live here. Laurinville didn't even choose it. Laurinville got amalgamated into it, and then we put some of our highest intensive use conflicts there in Laurinville. But I think even citywide, as all as St. Johners, I think the social license and the appetite that we have typically had as an industrial city is changing. And I think that social license isn't what it used to be, and we have higher expectations of what coexisting with industry looks like, no matter how much we have. So because I'm not convinced that there's truly a lack of supply citywide for industry, there may be in the industrial parks, easily developed on a giant pad, but I do not feel that we have a lack of industrial supply on the whole in the city, and I haven't been convinced of that. Like, do I think somebody could convince me? Maybe, but I'm not. I'm not convinced that it's an adequate buffer there, because I don't know. It's like, I don't know what the next aim looks like. I think that we've changed as a city because of some of the experiences that we've had as a city, and I don't know what the next danger looks like, so I think it's difficult to make a decision on what a buffer looks like. So I would be voting against the original staff one, but I'm open to this. I guess I'm curious if, like, what can come out of this? Like, what can come out of this in this time between now and council that could be what I'm worried is it just gets bumped along, and there isn't enough meaningful conversation because the timeline is so short, and it's just a way to get it to the next level, and I'm not comfortable with where it's at right now. But if anybody who's making a motion can speak to that, that'd be great.
Sorry, Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We just on supply of land. Again, we don't see a lot of industry ones, but we certainly have heard enough about available land, lots of land. St. John has lots of land, but it's not available, right? Folks are speculating on residential land. Folks are speculating in holding industrial land. So is there available industrial land? I don't think there is for a group like Envision to be able to capitalize on opportunities. But we as PAC, we have to make a recommendation to council. Now, it is either yes, no, or we have the ability to say we're not making a recommendation. I would be leaning that way because I don't blame Laurenville for not trusting us. They got conscripted into St. John, and then it just had horrible things. And from what I'm learning, nobody leaves. So the memory in Laurenville is long and deep. So I don't blame them at all for being upset with us, even though they may not know us, just because why would you trust a group that's, every few years comes and hammers you again? I don't blame you for coming in and being concerned. I do appreciate the time you've spent coming in, because I know a lot of folks have said they hate this process. I actually like this process. My questions tend to come late because I like to sit and listen. And I got a really good education. And I don't like the buffer. I think the point on, why do windmills have a 300-meter buffer, and what's the term? Volatile and offensive industry would have a 300-meter buffer. Doesn't make sense. I think it needs a bigger buffer. And the other thing, and a bit of self-realization, so thank you to the speakers for helping me get here. I don't want to build any volatile or offensive industry anywhere in St. John. That time is, in my mind, is past. St. John is in a good place right now on the whole. We're moving forward. From my perspective, we're not desperate to take whatever industry knocks on our door and says, hey, you want to put another AIM somewhere? We got some jobs. We're not there now. Do we have a need for land? Councillor Lowe talked about, we need space for containers that are coming off these ships and getting shipped left, right, and center by rail. We definitely have a need, and that's kind of a growing niche, but I think that's somewhat less offensive, except we need better roads. If we're gonna expand and have monster laydown areas somewhere hidden between 500 meters and more of a treed buffer, we can't have that going down the main drag that's blocking the community either. So I don't know, I think all of this could be figured out in more conversation. As far as I know, and I'm being as transparent as I can be, I don't know anything more. The folks in Envision definitely know more. There's no rush. There's nobody planning to be there in December, as far as I know. We've got time to figure this out. I think there's some meat here worth talking about, but it's definitely I can't vote in favor of what's in front of us, but I think, given what I heard tonight, I think there's room for conversation and room to get somewhere. So I would lean towards making an official recommendation to council, making no recommendation, and adding, what Mr. Como has said, that recommendation to council would be pause, have a conversation, and figure it out. I know there's a motion on the floor. But perhaps if Mr. Como would just add to his motion that officially we make no recommendation to council, then it all makes sense to me.
Mr. Como?
Through you, Chair. Mark, does that make sense for the timeline? Is to go back and is that doable before November the 12th? With city staff and some residents of the leaders, I guess, who you know who you are. I think we heard a lot of you tonight. Does that timeline even work?
I think it's a reasonable question. November 12th, that's only about a month and a bit out, right? So is that enough time? I don't know.
But I guess what we're saying is there's no rush. We've heard that many times tonight. There's no rush. So if we don't make the November 12th meeting, what will that do for council, I guess?
Through the chair, if I could interject, I think if the committee doesn't make a recommendation, then that goes to council as something that the PAC has not made a recommendation. From that point onwards, I think it would depend on council to make that decision as to how they consider your other recommendation. Whether they choose to then postpone the public hearing to give the process some more time, it would be entirely dependent on council at that point.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for staff that follows up on that. Can we make a recommendation to council to postpone the public hearing until more conversation has been done? That's a question to staff.
Through the chair, I believe the PAC is here to make the recommendations, and you can make that recommendation. But as far as the decision is concerned, it would be taken as that the PAC has not made a decision on the application. So that's one outcome. And then, of course, whatever recommendation you make, it would be up to council to take that into consideration.
Okay, well, I certainly don't mind amending my original recommendation to state that we're not in support of staff recommendation at this point, and we'd like discussion, them to go back, discussion between staff and the Lorneville residents. Yes, you'd have to second it.
Thank you very much. I have a question or comment from Councilor Lowe.
I'm going to agree with your motion, but if the 11th day of November, the 10th day of November comes and it's not clear between the two parties, then the two parties themselves say, we'll extend it. I mean, it's the two parties that motion says they get together, their leaders and the people behind me. So if they, on the 10th day, 9th day, they're not got something that's workable, then they themselves will say, we want to go another 2 weeks or something. That'll solve that problem.
Yeah, I won't put a time frame on that motion.
Thank you very much, Councilor Lowe.
Does that work? No time frame? I had originally said November 12th, but we'll take the time frame off.
Does that work?
Mark?
So no recommendation to council with advice to...
Yeah, okay.
The challenge that you'd get into in the public hearing is, you'd have to cancel, potentially if you have to cancel the hearing, there's also an advertising timeline that has to go with that as well. So it's not, the next council meeting. So You know, providing the flexibility, I think the important thing here is to give, there needs to be discussion, and I think both parties have to have the flexibility and time to have the discussion.
Okay. So my motion is no recommendation to council.
Sorry, can you clarify, is that no recommendation or a no vote?
A no recommendation to council. And the second part of that is for city staff to meet with the residents, all the people involved, and no time frame on that.
Okay. And we still have a second on the amended motion. All right. I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Just one point on that, PAC doesn't have the authority to direct staff, so that has to come through some other body.
Making the recommendation to council to direct staff.
That's exactly what I said.
Yes.
You heard proper.
All right. As noted. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. This concludes this matter. Committee, we now complete our meeting agenda. Unless there are any other business items to discuss, I'll seek a motion to adjourn. Motion by Councilor Lowe, second by Councilor Sullivan. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Our meeting is adjourned. Our next regularly scheduled PAC meeting will be November 19th, 2024. Thank you very much.